The contract landed on Derek Chen's desk with a satisfying thud at exactly 11:47 p.m. $50 million worth of digital transactions ready to flow through Park Hospitality's pristine restaurant accounts within the next 72 hours. Raven Ellis watched from behind the counter of Murphy's Diner, her hands steady as she wiped down coffee cups, though her ears tracked every word of the hushed conversation between Derek and his associate Tony Martinez. "The Korean will never suspect his own district manager," Derek whispered, sliding the papers into his briefcase. "Especially not when the money flows through the same accounts that have been clean for 5 years. Tony shifted nervously. "What about the waitstaff? Someone might overhear." "Please." Derek's laugh was cold metal scraping glass. "Look at this place. A disgraced chef serving coffee at 2 a.m. Nobody listens to the help." Raven's grip tightened on the ceramic mug. She knew that voice, that condescending tone that had haunted her nightmares for 3 years. The same voice that had whispered poison into the ears of New York's food critics, planting evidence of supposed health violations that destroyed her restaurant and reputation overnight. The same voice that had stolen her James Beard nomination and left her daughter Maya without the private school tuition she'd promised. $50 million, Derek continued, will pass through the Park restaurants next week. The beauty is, Junho Park trusts me completely. He's too busy playing CEO to notice what happens in his own buildings. At the corner table, the Asian man in the simple navy sweater and worn jeans looked up from his newspaper. For 3 weeks, he'd been coming to Murphy's every Tuesday and Thursday, ordering black coffee and reading the financial section with the concentration of someone solving puzzles. Raven had noticed his hands, too soft for manual labor, too careful for anything but signing important documents. She'd noticed his watch too, a Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's cars, though he tried to hide it under his sleeve. What she hadn't noticed was that he'd been listening to every word Derek Chen had ever spoken in this diner. Junho Park, heir to a hospitality empire worth $2.3 billion, had been investigating stolen funds from his company for 6 months. Someone had been bleeding his accounts dry with surgical precision, always staying just below the threshold that would trigger automatic audits. The thefts were brilliant, patient, and completely invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. He'd started coming to this rundown diner because the financial records showed irregular cash deposits from Murphy's account. Small amounts, but consistent enough to raise questions. What he'd found instead was Derek Chen, his most trusted district manager, orchestrating the largest corporate theft in Park Hospitality's history. "The deposits start tomorrow," Derek was saying. 3 restaurants, 17 transactions per day, all under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting. By Friday, we'll be ghosts with clean passports and accounts in the Caymans. Tony nodded. "What about Park himself?" Derek's smile was a razor. "Let him try to prove anything. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll be untouchable." Raven's hand trembled as she set down the mug. Maya was alone at home, probably doing homework by the light of her laptop screen, dreaming of the college applications they couldn't afford. 3 years of serving coffee and swallowing pride had taught Raven to be invisible, to let the powerful play their games without interference. But $50 million meant Derek would disappear forever, taking with him any chance she'd ever have of clearing her name or rebuilding the career he'd destroyed. The Asian man at table 6 was still reading his newspaper, but his posture had changed. His shoulders were tighter, his breathing more controlled. When Derek stood to leave, the man's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his phone. Raven made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice cutting through the diner's fluorescent hum. "Sir? At table 6? The Asian man looked up, and for the first time in 3 weeks their eyes met directly. His were dark brown, intelligent, and completely alert despite the late hour. "Your coffee's getting cold," Raven said, walking toward his table with deliberate steps. "But that's not what I need to tell you." Derek had frozen halfway to the door. Tony's hand was already moving toward his jacket, a movement that spoke of violence and desperation. Raven stopped beside table 6, her voice low enough that only the man could hear. "That conversation you've been listening to? Derek Chen is about to steal $50 million from someone named Park. The transactions start tomorrow." The man's newspaper didn't move, but his knuckles went white where they gripped the edges. "How do you know my name?" Junho Park asked quietly. Raven's heart stopped. "Your name?" But before she could process what that meant, Derek's voice cut through the air like broken glass. Well, looks like our waitress has been eavesdropping." She turned to find Derek walking back toward them, his smile now predatory and cold. Tony flanked him, his hand clearly resting on something metallic inside his jacket. "The question isn't whether you'll report me," Derek said, stopping 3 feet from Raven. "It's whether your daughter will be alive to see it." The name Maya hung in the air like a death sentence. And in that moment, as Raven stared into Derek's eyes and saw her worst nightmare reflected back, she realized that the quiet man at table 6, the man whose name was apparently Park, might be her only chance at survival, or her final mistake. Most viewers aren't subscribed to our channel yet, but if you're already invested in Raven and Junho's story, hitting subscribe helps us bring you more complex tales of love, betrayal, and redemption like this one. Your support makes these deep dives into human drama possible. Derek's threat hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, but it was Junho's reaction that made Raven's blood freeze. The newspaper crumpled in his hands as he stood, and suddenly the mild-mannered customer transformed into something else entirely, someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. "Derek," Junho's voice carried the authority of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. "I think you should sit down." Derek's confident smirk faltered. "I'm sorry. Who are you to—" "Your boss." The words hit like a physical blow. Derek's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and finally, pure terror, as he realized that his carefully planned heist had been witnessed by the one person who could destroy him completely. "Chairman Park," Derek's voice cracked like a teenager's. "I can explain." "You can be silent," Junho said, pulling out his phone with movements so controlled they seemed choreographed. "Tony Martinez, correct? Armed security, formerly employed by Torino Construction before they went under for money laundering." Tony's hand stopped moving toward his weapon. The specificity of the information was more terrifying than any threat. "Raven Ellis," Junho continued, his gaze shifting to her. "Former executive chef at Meridian in Manhattan. James Beard nominee 2022. Restaurant closed due to fabricated health violations." Raven's world tilted sideways. This stranger knew more about her ruined life than most of her friends did. "Fabricated?" she whispered. "Derek needed you gone because you were getting too close to irregularities in supplier invoicing at the restaurant where you worked before Meridian," Junho explained, his phone now recording everything. "Your attention to detail in kitchen management extended to financial discrepancies. You would have noticed the ghost transactions he was running through your food costs." Derek was backing toward the door, but Tony remained frozen, clearly calculating odds that weren't in his favor. 3 years, Raven breathed. 3 years I thought I'd failed. Thought I'd made some mistake that cost everything. "You never failed," Junho said firmly. "You were sabotaged by a man who's been stealing from my company since 2021. The health violations were paid for with money stolen from Park hospitality accounts." The revelation hit Raven like a physical blow. All the self-doubt, the nights Maya had asked why they couldn't afford her art supplies, the humiliation of serving coffee to people who'd once celebrated her culinary genius. All of it built on a lie designed to protect Derek's criminal enterprise. But now, Derek recovered some of his composure. "You have a problem. You can't prove any of this without involving the police, and once they start investigating, they'll discover some very interesting things about Miss Ellis's current employment status." Junho raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "She's been working under a false social security number for 18 months. Derek's smile was poisonous. "Turns out when your credit is destroyed and your professional references are all lies, you have to get creative about employment verification. Raven's stomach dropped. It was true. After her ruined credit made legitimate employment impossible, she'd used a number that belonged to a cousin who'd died years earlier. It was fraud, technically, even though she'd been desperate to feed her daughter. "So here's what's going to happen," Derek continued. "I'm going to walk out that door with Tony. You're going to delete that recording and forget this conversation ever happened. Because if you don't, I'll make sure the IRS and Immigration Services receive an anonymous tip about Murphy's Diner's hiring practices." "And the $50 million?" Junho asked quietly. "Consider it my severance package." The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Junho did something unexpected. He laughed. "Derek, you've made several critical errors tonight. First, you assumed I've been investigating alone." As if summoned by his words, the diner's back door opened and 3 people in expensive suits walked in. Federal agents, Raven realized, recognizing the particular kind of confident authority they carried. "Second," Junho continued, "you assumed I wouldn't have backup plans for someone threatening my employees." "Your employees?" Derek's voice cracked again. Junho pulled out his wallet and placed a business card on the table. "Ms. Ellis, as of this moment, you're hired as executive chef for Park Hospitality's new flagship restaurant. Your daughter Maya is now covered under our family health plan, and there's a housing allowance that should get you out of whatever substandard apartment you've been forced to live in." Raven stared at the card. "I don't understand." "You saved my company tonight," Junho said simply. "You could have stayed silent, protected yourself, let Derek disappear with money that wasn't yours. Instead, you chose to warn a stranger. One of the federal agents was cuffing Tony, while another read Derek his rights. The third approached their table. Chairman Park, we'll need Ms. Ellis's statement, but it looks like her information will be crucial in building the case against Chen's network." "Network?" Raven asked. "Derek wasn't working alone," the agent explained. "We've been tracking a money laundering operation that runs through 17 restaurants across 3 states. Your ex-husband was the front man, but there are politicians, contractors, and other business owners involved. My ex-husband." Raven's voice was barely a whisper. Junho's expression gentled. "Derek Chen. You were married to him for 2 years before Maya was born. He stole your identity information during the divorce proceedings to set up the false accounts that destroyed your career." The room was spinning. Derek wasn't just the man who'd ruined her restaurant. He was Maya's father, the man who'd abandoned them when his daughter was 3 months old, claiming he wasn't ready for family responsibility. "Maya," she gasped. "He said he'd hurt Maya." "Maya is under protective custody as of 30 minutes ago," Junho said, showing her his phone screen. "My security team picked her up from your apartment. She's safe, and she's been told her mother is helping with an important investigation." Tears were streaming down Raven's face now. "Why are you helping me?" Junho hesitated, then spoke with careful honesty. "Because 18 months ago, I ate at a small Italian place in Chinatown. The pasta was perfectly executed, but what impressed me was how the chef modified a dish for a customer with allergies, not just accommodating them, but creating something more delicious than the original." Raven remembered that night. A gentleman with careful hands had ordered the cacio e pepe, then mentioned he couldn't eat dairy. She'd created a version using cashew cream and truffle oil that had made him close his eyes in appreciation. "That was you." "I've been looking for that chef for months," Junho admitted. "When I realized Raven Ellis was working at this diner, I had to understand why someone with your talent was serving coffee at 2 a.m. Derek was being led away in handcuffs, but he turned back one final time. This isn't over, Raven. You have no idea how deep this goes." The threat sent ice down her spine, but Junho's hand appeared on her shoulder, steady and warm. "Yes, it is over," he said firmly. "And Ms. Ellis, may I call you Raven? Tomorrow we're going to rebuild everything he took from you." As the federal agents cleared out and the diner returned to its fluorescent quiet, Raven found herself alone with the Korean billionaire who'd just turned her nightmare into what felt like a dream. But Derek's final words echoed in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming next would be far more dangerous than anything they'd faced tonight. The broken pieces of her life were finally being put back together, but someone else was determined to shatter them all over again. The safe house was a penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, all glass walls and imported furniture that probably cost more than Raven had made in her entire culinary career. Maya sat on a leather couch worth more than their previous year's rent, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard with the focused intensity she usually reserved for hacking school systems, just for fun. "Mom," Maya said without looking up, "this Derek guy is seriously bad news. I've been going through public records and his real name isn't even Derek Chen." Raven nearly dropped her coffee mug. "What?" "Born Derek Yamamoto. Changed it legally when he was 25 after his first money laundering conviction was expunged." Maya's fingers paused over her keyboard. "Mom, why didn't you tell me my biological father was a criminal?" The question hung in the air like shrapnel from an exploded bomb. Raven sank into the chair across from her daughter, studying the 16-year-old who'd grown up too fast, who'd learned to hack computers because regular teenage problems seemed boring, compared to wondering if they'd have electricity next month. "Because I hoped you'd never need to know," Raven said honestly. "When he left, he said he wasn't ready to be a father. I thought that was the end of it. Except it wasn't." Maya turned her laptop screen around. "Look at this." The screen showed a complex web of financial connections, company names, and dates spanning back 7 years. Maya had created a digital map that looked like something from a federal investigation. "Derek didn't just steal from Mr. Park's company," Maya continued. "He's been using identity information from his past relationships to create shell companies for almost a decade. Mom, there are 4 other women who were married to him under different names." Junho appeared in the doorway, carrying takeout bags that smelled like authentic Korean barbecue. "Maya, you should work for the FBI." "I'm 16 and black," Maya replied matter-of-factly. "The FBI will have to wait until I finish destroying the patriarchal systems of oppression from the inside." Junho blinked, then started laughing. "I like her. Most people do, until she hacks their Netflix accounts to prove a point," Raven said. But she was smiling for the first time in hours. "About that," Maya said sheepishly. "I may have accidentally accessed Mr. Park's personal security system while researching Derek. Sorry, but also you have 17 missed calls from someone named Mrs. Han, and she sounds really mad." Junho's expression darkened. "My mother. She knows about me?" Raven asked. "She knows about everything. Mrs. Han has contacts in federal law enforcement, the mayor's office, and 3 different news outlets. He set the food down with more force than necessary. She'll want to meet you." "That doesn't sound good." "It's not." Maya looked between them with the sharp awareness that came from growing up in a household where money was always tight and adults often spoke in coded warnings. "What's the problem?" Maya asked. "My family has certain expectations about appropriate relationships," Junho said carefully. "Traditional Korean families value compatibility of social status, education, family background. And I'm a disgraced black chef with a criminal for an ex-husband and a 16-year-old daughter," Raven finished. "You're an incredibly talented executive chef with a 16-year-old daughter who's brilliant enough to hack federal databases," Junho corrected firmly. "But yes, my mother will see the situation differently." Maya's laptop chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen and her expression changed from curious to alarmed. Guys? We have a problem." She turned the laptop around again. This time, the screen showed a video call request from a number Maya didn't recognize. But the preview image showed Derek's face, calling from what looked like a jail cell. "How is he calling?" Junho demanded. "Burner phone," Maya said grimly. "Someone smuggled it in." Raven's hand was shaking as she reached for the laptop. "Answer it." "Raven, no. He threatened my daughter," she said firmly. I want to hear what else he has to say. Maya clicked accept, and Derek's face filled the screen. He looked different. Older, more desperate, but also more dangerous in the way that cornered animals become unpredictable. "Hello, darling," Derek said, his voice carrying that familiar condescending sweetness that had once convinced her to marry him. "Hello, Maya. You've grown up so much." "What do you want?" Raven asked. "I want you to understand something very important," Derek continued. "The federal agents think they caught the mastermind, but I'm just middle management. The people I work for don't like loose ends." "Then you shouldn't have gotten caught," Maya said flatly. Derek laughed. "Smart girl, just like her mother, too smart for her own good." "Get to the point," Junho said, moving into the camera's view. "Ah, Prince Park. Tell me, have you wondered why your mother knows so much about federal investigations? Why she has contacts in law enforcement that could make this case disappear?" Raven felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Mrs. Han Park is one of my business partners." Derek's smile was poisonous. "She's been helping us launder money through Korean cultural organizations for 3 years. Your boyfriend's mother is as dirty as I am." Junho's face had gone completely blank, the expression of someone processing information that fundamentally changed everything they thought they knew about their world. "You're lying," he said quietly. "Am I? Ask her about the Harmony Foundation. Ask her about the $50,000 donations to Korean-American small businesses that never existed. Ask her why she was so interested in meeting Raven Ellis, the woman who could expose everything." The call ended, leaving them staring at a blank screen in silence that felt like the aftermath of an earthquake. Maya was the first to speak. "Mom, we need to get out of here. Now." "Why?" "Because if Mrs. Han is involved, then this safe house isn't safe," Maya said, already packing her laptop. "And if she's meeting with you tomorrow, it's not going to be a friendly introduction." Junho hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He was staring at nothing, his mind clearly racing through years of memories, looking for signs he'd missed, clues he'd ignored. "Junho," Raven said gently. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew about the investigation before I told her. She knew about Derek before his arrest was made public. She knew about you." A sound from the building's elevator made them all freeze. The penthouse elevator required a special keycard to access, a keycard that only Junho and his security team possessed. But they could hear it ascending. "Back door?" Raven asked. "There isn't one. We're 30 floors up." Maya was already at her laptop again, fingers flying. "Fire stairs, but they're alarmed." "Maya, got it. Alarms disabled." The elevator chimed softly as it reached their floor. "Move," Junho said, grabbing Raven's hand. "Whatever Derek said about my mother, we'll figure it out later. Right now, we run." As they slipped out through the emergency exit, Raven could hear voices in the apartment behind them, voices speaking rapid Korean, voices that sounded angry and determined and completely unafraid. Maya was right. If Mrs. Han was involved, nothing about their situation was what it seemed. And as they descended 30 flights of stairs in darkness, Raven realized that Derek's final threat hadn't been about what he might do to them. It had been a warning about what was already being done. The Lincoln Park Academy dismissal bell rang at exactly 3:27 p.m., just like it had every weekday for the past 4 years. Maya Ellis collected her AP chemistry homework, said goodbye to her lab partner, and walked toward the school's main exit with the casual confidence of a teenager who'd never had a reason to fear her daily routine. She did not notice the black SUV parked across from the student pickup area, or the way its driver had been watching her for the past week, learning her patterns with professional patience. At 3:31 p.m., Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Running late. Wait in the library. Love you." Maya frowned. Mom was never late, and she definitely never forgot to pick up her daughter when they'd agreed on a specific time. But the message came from her mother's number. So Maya turned back toward the school building, pulling out her headphones as she walked. She did not notice the second figure approaching from her blind side, or the small device in his hand that looked like a cell phone, but served a very different purpose. At 3:34 p.m., Maya Ellis was unconscious and being loaded into the back of the SUV that had been waiting for her. By 3:36 p.m., the vehicle was gone, and the only evidence of what had happened was a single sticker from Maya's laptop lying on the sidewalk, a small rainbow decal that said "Code like a girl" in bold letters. Raven was in the middle of her first staff meeting at Park Hospitality when her phone rang. She'd been explaining her vision for the new flagship restaurant to a room full of sous chefs, food critics, and corporate executives, feeling like herself for the first time in 3 years. The caller ID showed Maya's school. "I need to take this," she said, stepping into the hallway. "Ms. Ellis, this is Principal Rodriguez at Lincoln Park Academy. I'm calling because Maya never showed up for her after-school tutoring session, and her chemistry teacher says she left campus around 3:30. The world tilted sideways. "What do you mean she left campus?" "I got a text saying she was waiting in the library." "Ma'am, our library closed early today for maintenance. It's been locked since noon." Raven's hand was shaking as she ended the call and immediately dialed Maya's number. It went straight to voicemail. Not unusual, except that Maya always answered when her mother called, especially during school hours. "Junho," she called, bursting back into the conference room. "We have to go. Now." He took one look at her face and stood immediately. "What happened?" "Maya's missing." The words created a silence so profound that even the city noise outside seemed to pause. Then everyone was moving at once. Junho barking orders into his phone in rapid Korean, security personnel materializing from nowhere, and Raven trying not to collapse under the weight of every parent's worst nightmare. They were in Junho's car, racing toward the school, when Raven's phone rang again. Unknown number. She answered on the first ring. "Hello, Raven." Derek's voice made her blood freeze in her veins. "Where is she?" "She's safe. For now." Maya's quite impressive, by the way. She tried to hack her way out of zip tie restraints using a bobby pin and some very creative engineering. Just like her mother, too smart for her own good. "I swear to God, Derek, if you hurt her..." "I'm not going to hurt her," Derek interrupted. "But my business partners are less sentimental about family bonds. You have a choice to make." Junho was listening, his knuckles white where they gripped the steering wheel. "What do you want?" "Tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., there's going to be a press conference where Junho announces that the charges against me were based on fabricated evidence provided by a disgruntled employee with mental health issues." Derek's voice was calm, businesslike. "You're going to stand beside him and corroborate that story. That's insane. No one will believe..." "They'll believe it when you explain how your desperate financial situation led you to create false accusations in hopes of securing employment with Park Hospitality," Derek continued. "You'll admit to document fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit corporate sabotage. You want me to confess to crimes you committed. I want you to save your daughter's life." The line went silent, except for the sound of Raven's heart hammering against her ribs. "How do I know you won't hurt her anyway?" "Because Maya is my daughter too. And despite what you think of me, I don't kill children," Derek said. "But the people I work for have different standards. They see her as a liability who knows too much about their operations." "What people? Who are you working for?" "Give the press conference, Raven. Destroy your credibility and Junho's case against me. Do that, and Maya comes home safely. And if I refuse, then you'll never see her again." The call ended, leaving Raven staring at her phone as if it might provide answers to impossible questions. "We call the FBI," Junho said immediately. "No." Raven's voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. "He said they're watching for that. Any police involvement, and Maya disappears forever." "Raven, you can't seriously consider..." "She's my daughter," Raven said fiercely. "She's 16 years old. and she's alone with criminals who see her as a problem to be solved. You're damn right I'm considering it. They'd reached the school. Junho parked and turned to face her fully. Listen to me, he said. Derek is desperate. Men like him don't keep their word when they're cornered. Even if you give the press conference, even if you destroy both our reputations, there's no guarantee he'll release Maya. Then what do you suggest? We find her first. How? Junho's expression became something cold and calculating. The face of a man who'd built an empire by making hard decisions under impossible pressure. Maya isn't the only one who knows how to hack computer systems, he said. And Derek isn't the only one with dangerous connections. As if summoned by his words, 3 black sedans pulled into the school parking lot. Men and women in dark suits emerged, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of military training and federal authority. You called them anyway, Raven realized. I called someone better, Junho corrected. I called my mother. Raven's blood went cold. Your mother who might be working with Derek. My mother who definitely has resources that make the FBI look like mall security, Junho replied grimly. Derek made a mistake when he took Maya. He just declared war on the wrong family. Mrs. Han Park emerged from the lead sedan, 70 years old and moving like a woman half her age. She wore a tailored black coat and carried herself with the kind of authority that made even federal agents step aside. Her eyes found Junho first, then shifted to Raven with an expression that was impossible to read. So, Mrs. Han said in accented but perfect English, you're the woman my son has decided to care about. Mrs. Han, Raven began, if you're involved with Derek. I'm involved with many things, child, Mrs. Han interrupted. But harming teenagers isn't one of them. She pulled out her phone and made a brief call in Korean. When she hung up, she looked directly at Raven. Your daughter is alive, she said simply. Derek is holding her in a warehouse in Chinatown, along with 2 other hostages he's planning to use as leverage. How do you know that? Because Derek Chen is a small man with small ambitions who never understood that when you work for the Korean mob, you don't get to keep secrets from Korean matriarchs. The words hit like physical blows. The Korean mob. Mrs. Han wasn't just connected to Derek's operation. She was connected to something much larger and infinitely more dangerous. You're one of them, Raven whispered. I'm one of many things, Mrs. Han replied. But tonight, I'm the woman who's going to get your daughter back. She turned to Junho. You have 1 hour to decide if you're coming with us or staying here with your conscience. What's that supposed to mean? It means that getting Maya back safely might require methods that good men find uncomfortable, Mrs. Han said. Derek and his associates aren't going to be reasoned with or negotiated with. They understand only one language. Raven understood what she was saying. You're going to kill them. I'm going to do what's necessary to protect my family, Mrs. Han said firmly. As of this moment, that includes your daughter. The parking lot had emptied of students and teachers. Only the federal agents remained, waiting for orders from a woman who apparently outranked them in ways that had nothing to do with official government positions. Why are you helping me? Raven asked. Mrs. Han studied her for a long moment. Because my son loves you. And because Derek made the mistake of threatening someone I've decided to claim as granddaughter. You don't even know me. I know enough, Mrs. Han replied. I know you chose to warn my son instead of protecting yourself. I know you raised a brilliant daughter while working 3 jobs and never asking for help. I know you've survived Derek's attempts to destroy you twice, and you're still standing. She pulled out her phone again, this time showing Raven a photo. Maya, tied to a chair in what looked like an empty warehouse, but conscious and clearly unharmed. Derek thinks he's holding all the cards, Mrs. Han continued. He doesn't understand that he just kidnapped the granddaughter of the most dangerous woman in Chicago. Raven looked at the photo of her daughter and made the same kind of decision that had led her to warn a stranger in a diner about a $50 million theft. What do we need to do? Mrs. Han's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. We remind Derek Chen why Korean families are not to be trifled with. The warehouse in Chinatown smelled like old fish and older secrets, the kind of place where legitimate businesses went to die and illegitimate ones were born. Maya Ellis sat in the metal chair, her wrists zip-tied behind her back, studying her captors with the focused attention she usually reserved for debugging code. There were 3 of them. Derek, obviously, along with Tony Martinez and a third man she hadn't seen before. Asian, maybe 40, with the kind of casual violence that made her skin crawl. They'd been arguing in hushed voices for the past hour, and Maya had caught enough fragments to understand that their original plan was falling apart. "The Korean woman knows," the Asian man was saying. "My contact at the Port Authority says Mrs. Han's people have been asking questions about our shipping containers." "Then we move up the timeline," Derek replied. "The press conference happens in 6 hours instead of tomorrow morning." "What if Ellis doesn't show?" "She'll show. She's a mother." Maya wanted to laugh at that. Derek clearly didn't understand that her mother was also a chef who'd spent 15 years working in kitchens where backing down from a fight meant getting eaten alive. Raven Ellis had survived Gordon Ramsay screaming in her face, health inspectors trying to shut down her restaurant, and food critics determined to destroy her career. She wasn't going to fold because her ex-husband was having a tantrum. But she was also smart enough to know that mothers made different choices when their children's lives were at stake. Maya had to find a way to get herself out of this situation before Mom did something stupid and heroic. The zip ties were a problem, but not an insurmountable one. Maya had been picking locks since she was 12, and while these were more sophisticated, the principle remained the same. Find the weak point and apply pressure in the right direction. The bobby pin she'd hidden in her hair was gone, confiscated along with her phone and laptop. But they'd missed the small metal tool she kept sewn into the hem of her jacket. Technically a SIM card ejector, but sharp enough to serve multiple purposes. Maya worked the tool free while listening to Derek's increasingly frantic phone calls. He was talking to someone named Senator Walsh, promising that the Ellis situation would be resolved before it could damage something called the Pipeline Project. "Senator, I understand your concerns, but Raven Ellis is one disgraced chef with a criminal record," Derek was saying. "Her testimony won't hold up against our documentation." Maya felt the first zip tie give way. She kept her hands positioned as if they were still bound and continued listening. "Yes, sir. I know about the federal investigation. But Park Hospitality is just one of 17 companies we've been using. Even if they freeze those accounts, we have redundancies." 17 companies. Maya memorized the number, along with every other detail she could catch. If she was getting out of here alive, she was taking enough evidence to put all these people away for decades. The second zip tie was tougher, but Maya had patience and motivation in equal measure. As Derek continued his phone conversation, she worked steadily at the plastic restraint, feeling it gradually weaken under pressure. "The pipeline isn't just about money laundering," Derek was explaining to whoever was on the other end. "It's about infrastructure contracts, Senator. $50 billion in federal highway funding that goes through Korean-American construction companies we control." Maya's blood went cold. They weren't just stealing from restaurants. They were stealing from federal infrastructure projects. Roads, bridges, public works that affected millions of people. "Of course, Mrs. Han is involved," Derek continued. "Who do you think has been helping us navigate Korean business networks for the past 5 years?" The second zip tie snapped free. Maya kept her hands behind her back and started working on her ankles, which were bound with rope instead of plastic. Rope was actually easier, more traditional, more predictable. "Maya's just insurance," Derek said, glancing in her direction. "Once Raven gives the press conference and destroys her own credibility, we eliminate the girl and disappear. Clean slate." Maya forced herself to keep breathing normally. Derek had just confirmed what she'd suspected. This was never about ransom or negotiation. They planned to kill her regardless of what her mother did, which meant Mom was walking into a trap that would get them both killed. The ankle ropes came free just as Derek ended his phone call. Maya kept her feet positioned as if they were still bound and waited for her opportunity. How much longer? Tony asked. 2 hours until the press conference, Derek replied. Then we make the Ellis problem disappear permanently. What about Park? Junho will be destroyed right alongside her. No one will believe anything he says after his girlfriend publicly admits to framing me. Maya felt rage building in her chest, not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating fury that made her dangerous at computer terminals. These men had destroyed her mother's career once before, stolen 3 years of their lives, and now they planned to end everything permanently. They'd made a fundamental error, though. They assumed that Maya Ellis was just a scared teenager waiting for rescue. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who'd been hacking since she was 10, who'd learned survival skills from a mother who'd fought her way through every kitchen hierarchy in Manhattan, who'd inherited both intellectual brilliance and street-smart determination. Maya waited until Derek and Tony moved to the far side of the warehouse to check on something, leaving her with only the third man as a guard. He was distracted by his phone, probably watching social media or texting girlfriends. Maya stood up smoothly, her restraints falling away like stage props. The guard looked up just in time to see her grab a wrench from a nearby workbench. "Hey!" Maya swung the wrench with all the force she could generate, connecting with his wrist as he reached for his weapon. The crack of breaking bone was audible across the warehouse. Derek and Tony spun around, but Maya was already moving, grabbing her laptop bag from the table where they'd dumped her possessions. More importantly, she grabbed Tony's phone, which was still logged into whatever network they were using to coordinate their operations. "Stop her!" Derek screamed. Maya dove behind a stack of shipping containers as gunshots rang out. She'd expected this. Desperate men with everything to lose always defaulted to violence. But she had advantages they didn't anticipate. She knew this warehouse. During the months when Mom had been working 3 jobs, Maya had spent afternoons in Chinatown, exploring the neighborhood while waiting for the late bus home. She'd played in these abandoned buildings, learned their layouts, found the exits that weren't marked on any official plans. There was a drainage tunnel that connected to the storm sewer system, accessible through a grate in the basement level. Maya had discovered it during a particularly boring Tuesday when she'd been 12 years old. Time to see if her memory and her luck were both still functioning. Maya made it to the basement as Derek's voice echoed through the building, calling for backup, calling for Mrs. Hahn's people to be eliminated, calling for the entire operation to be moved to Chicago before law enforcement could respond. The grate was exactly where she remembered it, and still loose enough to move with effort. Maya squeezed through the opening into darkness that smelled like rain and urban runoff. But before she disappeared into the tunnels, she did one more thing with Tony's phone. She uploaded every text message, every contact, every photo to a cloud storage account that Derek's people would never be able to access or delete. Maya Ellis was going to get home alive. And when she did, she was bringing enough evidence to destroy everyone involved in the operation that had nearly killed her family twice. Derek Chen had no idea that his 16-year-old daughter was about to become his worst nightmare. Mrs. Han Park sat across from Raven in the back of a bulletproof sedan that smelled like expensive leather and unspoken threats, her hands folded with the patience of someone who'd learned to wait for exactly the right moment to destroy her enemies. Between them on the seat lay a manila folder thick with documents, photographs, and evidence that represented 15 years of careful investigation. "Before we continue," Mrs. Han said in her precisely modulated English, "you should understand something about Korean family structures." Raven kept her eyes on her phone, hoping for any message from Maya. "I'm not really in the mood for cultural education right now. When my husband built Park Hospitality, he did so with the understanding that our family would be targeted by jealous competitors, corrupt officials, and petty criminals," Mrs. Han continued, unmoved by Raven's impatience. "Korean chaebols, family-controlled business groups, survive by maintaining networks of information, influence, and when necessary, intimidation." The sedan turned onto Lakeshore Drive, moving through evening traffic with the smooth efficiency of a vehicle whose driver knew how to navigate around legal obstacles. "You're telling me you're some kind of crime boss," Raven said flatly. I'm telling you that Derek Chen made the mistake of threatening a family that has survived Japanese occupation, Korean War, and 40 years of American corporate espionage, Mrs. Han replied. We didn't build a billion-dollar empire by being naive about how the world actually works. She opened the manila folder and withdrew a series of photographs. Derek in various locations around Chicago, meeting with men in expensive suits, exchanging briefcases, signing documents. Derek has been under surveillance by our security team for 18 months, Mrs. Han continued. We knew he was stealing from the company, but we wanted to understand the scope of his operation before taking action. You knew he was stealing and you let it continue? We let it continue because Derek is small fish, Mrs. Han said. The people he works for are not. She spread more photographs on the seat between them. Faces Raven didn't recognize, but clearly important people based on the expensive restaurants and private clubs where the meetings were taking place. Senator Walsh, Congressman Martinez, 3 federal judges, the mayor of Chicago's chief of staff. Mrs. Han's voice was clinical, detached. Derek wasn't just laundering money through restaurants. He was purchasing political influence for a Korean-American organized crime syndicate that controls construction contracts worth $50 billion. Raven felt sick. And you're part of this? I've been investigating this for 3 years, Mrs. Han corrected. My husband's legitimate business was being used as a front for illegal activities we knew nothing about. Derek was placed in our company specifically to compromise our operations. By who? By the same people who destroyed your restaurant in New York. Mrs. Han withdrew another photograph. This one showing Derek in what looked like a private dining room, sitting across from a woman Raven recognized immediately. Senator Patricia Wells, the politician who'd been pushing for increased federal funding for Korean-American small business initiatives. Derek's operation wasn't just about money, Mrs. Han explained. It was about creating a network of compromised Korean-American business owners who could be controlled and manipulated for political purposes. I don't understand. Derek marries successful women, gathers intelligence on their operations, then destroys their careers while stealing their identity information to create shell companies, Mrs. Han said. Your restaurant wasn't his first target. It was his 5th. The words hit like physical blows. Raven wasn't Derek's only victim. She was part of a pattern, a systematic campaign of destruction that had been going on for years. The other women? 2 are dead. Apparent suicides after their businesses were destroyed and they faced federal fraud charges. Mrs. Han's expression remained impassive, but her voice carried undertones of controlled fury. The 3rd moved to Korea and lives under an assumed identity. The 4th is serving a 10-year sentence for crimes Derek committed using her stolen information. Raven's hands were shaking now. Maya is not going to become another casualty of Derek's ambition, Mrs. Han said firmly. But getting her back safely requires you to understand what you're really fighting. Which is? Mrs. Han closed the folder and leaned back in her seat. A conspiracy that reaches from Chicago restaurants to Washington, D.C. political offices, funded by Korean mob money, and protected by politicians who've been bought with stolen federal infrastructure funds. The sedan was slowing now, approaching what looked like an abandoned industrial complex in a part of the city Raven didn't recognize. Where are we going? To get your daughter, Mrs. Han replied. But first, you need to make a decision. What kind of decision? Mrs. Han pulled out her phone and showed Raven a video feed. Maya, somewhere that looked like a basement or tunnel system, moving carefully through darkness with what appeared to be a cell phone providing her only light. Maya escaped 20 minutes ago, Mrs. Han said. She's currently making her way through the storm drain system toward a maintenance exit about half a mile from where Derek was holding her. She got out? She's safe? She's free, but not safe, Mrs. Han corrected. Derek has 12 men searching for her, and they've been ordered to shoot on sight. Raven's relief transformed immediately into renewed terror. We have to get her. We will. But Derek also has a backup plan. Mrs. Han showed her another video feed, this one showing the warehouse where Maya had been held. bodies on the floor, blood on the walls, and Derek standing over what looked like crime scene evidence being planted. He's going to claim that Maya was killed during a failed rescue attempt by Korean gang members, Mrs. Han explained. The dead men are expendable associates whose deaths can be blamed on gang warfare. Maya becomes a tragic victim of Korean organized crime violence. But she's alive. Only if we can get to her before Derek's people do. And only if you're willing to help me destroy the entire political network that made Derek's crimes possible. Mrs. Han opened the folder again, this time showing Raven documents that looked like bank statements, wire transfer records, and what appeared to be transcripts of recorded conversations. I have evidence that can end Derek's operation and put 17 politicians in federal prison, Mrs. Han said. But using that evidence means admitting that Park Hospitality has been unknowingly involved in money laundering for 3 years. So Junho will face federal charges as well. Obstruction of justice at minimum. Possibly conspiracy, depending on how aggressively the prosecutors want to pursue him. Raven understood now. You're asking me to choose between saving Maya and protecting your son. I'm asking you to choose between easy justice and complete justice, Mrs. Han corrected. We can save Maya quietly, eliminate Derek and his immediate associates, and go back to our lives. Or we can save Maya publicly, expose the entire conspiracy, and accept that doing so will destroy everything my family has built. The sedan had stopped. Outside the windows, Raven could see federal agents taking positions around the industrial complex, preparing for what looked like a coordinated raid. Why are you letting me decide? Mrs. Han's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because Junho loves you. And because after studying your history for 3 months, I've concluded that you make good decisions under impossible pressure. Raven looked at the evidence spread between them. Thought about Maya alone in storm drains with armed men hunting her. Thought about Junho facing federal charges for crimes he didn't commit. Thought about 4 other women who'd been destroyed by Derek's ambitions. If we go public with everything, how many people get justice? Everyone, Mrs. Han said. Derek, his political conspirators, the Korean mob figures who've been stealing federal infrastructure money, and every politician who took bribes to look the other way. And if we handle this quietly? Derek dies tonight. Maya comes home safely, and the larger conspiracy continues operating under different management. Raven made her decision the same way she'd always made decisions, by asking herself what she'd want Maya to remember about her mother's choices. We go public with everything, she said firmly. Maya deserves to grow up in a world where people like Derek can't destroy families for profit. Mrs. Han smiled for the first time since Raven had met her. I was hoping you'd say that. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. Within seconds, Raven could hear helicopters approaching and see additional federal vehicles surrounding the complex. Mrs. Han, how long have you been working with federal authorities? Since the day my husband died and I discovered that Derek's people had been slowly poisoning him for 6 months. Mrs. Han replied matter-of-factly. I've been building this case for 3 years, waiting for the right catalyst to bring everything into the open. Catalyst? A victim brave enough to testify publicly, Mrs. Han said. A mother willing to risk everything to protect not just her own daughter, but all the daughters who might be targeted next. The sedan door opened and Junho appeared, along with what looked like an entire FBI tactical team. Maya? Raven asked. Safe, he said, helping her out of the car. She's already giving her statement to federal agents, and she brought enough digital evidence to prosecute this case for the next 20 years. Raven felt her knees go weak with relief. Where is she? Command center, 3 blocks away, probably teaching FBI agents how to properly hack into criminal networks, Junho said, smiling despite everything. She asked me to tell you that Derek really should have confiscated her backup phone. Sofia Martinez had been wiping down the same whiskey glass for 5 minutes, her hands moving automatically, while her mind processed what she'd overheard from the VIP booth in the back corner of Meridian Lounge. 3 men in expensive suits speaking in hushed voices about the Ellis problem, and permanent solutions, language that made her bartender's instincts scream danger. She'd known Raven for 8 years, since they'd both been struggling to make rent in a shared apartment in Queens while chasing impossible dreams in New York's culinary scene. When Derek had destroyed Raven's restaurant and reputation, Sophia had been the one to drive the U-Haul to Chicago, the one to help Maya adjust to a new school, the one to listen to Raven cry at 3 a.m. about the career that had been stolen from her. Now those same men were back, and they were talking about making sure Raven never had the chance to testify about what she'd witnessed. Sophia pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Raven. "Need to talk. Now. Don't come here." The response came back immediately. "Can't talk. Maya safe. Federal case happening. We'll call soon." Federal case. Sophia's blood went cold. If the FBI was involved, then whatever Raven had stumbled into was bigger than restaurant theft or identity fraud. And if these men knew about federal involvement, then they were either very well connected or very desperate. Probably both. Sophia made a decision that would save her best friend's life and cost her own. She activated the voice recording app on her phone, slipped the device into her apron pocket, and walked toward the VIP booth with a fresh bottle of 20-year-old scotch. "Gentlemen," she said with her most professional smile. "Compliments of the management." The 3 men looked up. 2 Asians, 1 white, all carrying themselves with the particular arrogance of people who were accustomed to buying their way out of problems. The white man she recognized from news photos, Congressman Rodriguez, who sat on the House Transportation Committee and had been instrumental in securing federal highway funding for Chicago area projects. "Thank you, sweetheart," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the condescending sweetness that made Sophia want to pour the scotch over his head instead of into his glass. "You're very attentive." "I try to take care of my regulars," Sophia replied, pouring 3 generous measures. "Especially when they're discussing such important business." The 2 Asian men exchanged glances. The older one, silver-haired, expensive watch, scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence in his past, spoke in accented English. "You have excellent hearing, Miss Martinez. Sophia Martinez." She kept her smile bright and empty. "And I have excellent discretion, too. Bartenders learn to hear everything and remember nothing." "Smart policy," the younger Asian man said. His English was perfect, Americanized, but his eyes carried the same cold calculation as his companion. Especially in a business where loose talk can be problematic. Sophia finished pouring and stepped back, but not before she'd positioned herself where her phone could capture their conversation clearly. "Will there be anything else?" "Actually, yes," Rodriguez said. "We're looking for someone. A friend of ours named Raven Ellis. We heard she might frequent establishments like this." Sophia's heart rate spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. "The name sounds familiar. Black woman, maybe late 30s, used to be a chef?" "That's her," the older Asian man said. "Have you seen her recently?" "Not for weeks," Sophia lied smoothly. "But I could ask around, see if any of the other bartenders have spotted her." "That would be very helpful." Rodriguez smiled, pulling out his wallet and extracting $500 bills. "We're old friends, and we've lost touch. This is just to cover your time and trouble." Sophia took the money, knowing that accepting it made her complicit in whatever they were planning, but also knowing that refusing it would make them suspicious. "I'll make some calls," she promised. "Excellent. And Miss Martinez? Our friend Raven has been under a lot of stress lately. She's been saying things, making accusations that aren't true. If you do find her, it would be better for everyone if she took some time to rest somewhere quiet until her mind clears up." The threat was delivered with Rodriguez's politician's smile, but Sophia heard it clearly enough. They wanted Raven disappeared, possibly permanently. "I understand completely," Sophia said. "Sometimes people need help getting the rest they deserve." The younger Asian man's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed dramatically, from calculated calm to something approaching panic. "We need to go," he said in rapid-fire Korean to his companion. Then, Switching back to English. There's been a development. What kind of development? Rodriguez demanded. The kind that requires immediate action, the older man replied, standing and throwing a $100 bill on the table. Miss Martinez, if our friend Raven contacts you, tell her that Derek sends his regards, and that he's looking forward to a family reunion. The three men left quickly, but not before Sophia caught one final exchange between the Koreans. Something about the girl, and containment protocols, and federal interference. Sophia waited until their car had pulled away from the curb, then immediately called Raven's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried Junho's number, which Maya had given her weeks earlier, just in case Mom needs help with rich people problems. That also went to voicemail. Sophia was considering her options when her phone rang. Unknown number. Meridian Lounge. This is Sophia. Miss Martinez? The voice was Korean accented, female, and carried absolute authority. This is Mrs. Han Park. I believe you just served drinks to 3 men who are planning to kill my son's girlfriend. Sophia nearly dropped the phone. How did you... I have surveillance on everyone connected to this case, including Raven's closest friends, Mrs. Han said. What did they tell you? Sophia looked around the empty bar, suddenly aware of how isolated she was, how easy it would be for those men to return with different intentions. They wanted me to find Raven and tell her Derek sends his regards, Sophia said. They said she needed rest somewhere quiet until her mind cleared up. They were ordering you to help them kidnap her. I figured that out. Miss Martinez, I need you to listen very carefully, Mrs. Han continued. Those men are going to realize that you recorded their conversation. They're going to come back to eliminate that evidence and the witness who gathered it. Sophia's stomach dropped. How do you know I recorded them? Because you're Raven's best friend, and Raven's best friend is smart enough to gather evidence when criminals threaten someone she cares about, Mrs. Han said. You have 15 minutes before they return. Are you prepared to disappear for a few days? Disappear where? Somewhere safe, where you can give your testimony to federal agents and help us put these people in prison permanently. Sophia looked at the bar she'd managed for 3 years, at the life she'd built in Chicago, at the safety and routine she was about to abandon to protect her best friend. What do I need to do? Walk out the back door right now. Leave everything except your phone and wallet. There's a black sedan in the alley. Get in it. Sophia grabbed her purse and headed for the exit, but stopped when she heard the front door chime. Through the mirror behind the bar, she could see Rodriguez returning, along with 2 other men she didn't recognize, bigger men with the kind of bulk that spoke of gym time and violence. Miss Martinez, Mrs. Han's voice was urgent. Are they back? Yes, Sophia whispered. Back door. Now, run. Sophia dropped to a crouch and crawled toward the rear exit, her heart hammering against her ribs as she heard Rodriguez calling her name with false friendliness. Sophia, we forgot to ask you something important. She made it to the back door and slipped out into the alley, where a black sedan was indeed waiting. The driver, a Korean woman in her 30s with the bearing of someone comfortable with weapons, motioned her into the passenger seat. Mrs. Han? Sophia asked as they pulled away from the bar. I'm Detective Kim, Federal Organized Crime Task Force, the woman replied. Mrs. Han is coordinating with multiple agencies to take down the entire network tonight. What about my bar? Detective Kim showed her a tablet displaying live security feed from inside Meridian Lounge. Rodriguez and his associates were tearing the place apart, clearly looking for recording equipment or evidence of Sophia's conversation with them. Your bar will be fine once we arrest everyone involved, Kim said. But if you'd stayed another 2 minutes, you wouldn't be. Sophia watched her workplace being destroyed by men who'd smiled at her while planning to kill her best friend. When can I testify? Right now, if you're ready, Kim replied. We have federal prosecutors standing by, and your recording might be the final piece they need to issue warrants for 17 politicians and 32 organized crime figures. As they drove through Chicago toward whatever federal facility housed task forces that dealt with Korean-American organized crime, Sophia thought about Raven facing down Derek in that diner, choosing to warn a stranger instead of protecting herself. Now it was Sophia's turn to risk everything for the people she loved. But unlike Raven, Sophia wouldn't be facing the danger alone. She'd be bringing the full weight of federal law enforcement down on the men who'd made the mistake of threatening her family. The last thing she saw in the sedan's rearview mirror was Meridian Lounge going up in flames, orange light reflecting off the windows of buildings that had watched her build a life she was now sacrificing to save her best friend. But Derek had made a fundamental error when he'd ordered Sophia's death. He'd assumed that loyalty was a weakness instead of the most dangerous weapon in the world. The federal safe house smelled like instant coffee and institutional anxiety, but Sophia Martinez had never been more focused in her life. She sat across from 3 FBI agents, 2 DOJ prosecutors, and a Korean-American detective who looked like she could dismantle a small army without breaking a sweat. Between them lay her phone, still recording, and a transcript of every word the men in her bar had spoken about eliminating Raven Ellis. "Miss Martinez," Agent Thompson said, "you understand that testifying in this case puts you at significant personal risk?" "Those men burned down my bar," Sophia replied matter-of-factly. "They were planning to kill my best friend. Risk is relative." Detective Kim, whose real name, Sophia had learned, was Detective Grace Kim of the Chicago Police Department's Organized Crime Unit, spread a series of photographs across the table. "Can you identify the 3 men who approached you?" Sophia pointed immediately to the familiar faces. Him, and him. The white guy is Congressman Rodriguez. I've seen him on the news. The older Korean man had scars on his knuckles and spoke with an accent. The younger one spoke perfect English. Expensive clothes, looked like money. "James Park and Michael Kim," Detective Kim said, writing names under the photographs. "James is Mrs. Han's nephew, ironically enough. Michael is connected to Korean organized crime figures in Los Angeles and Seattle. Mrs. Han's nephew is working with the people trying to kill her son? Family business can be complicated," Agent Thompson said dryly, "especially when there are billions of dollars at stake." One of the DOJ prosecutors, a sharp-faced woman named Sarah Chen, leaned forward with a legal pad covered in notes. "Miss Martinez, I need to ask about your relationship with Raven Ellis. How long have you known her?" 8 years. We shared an apartment in Queens when we were both broke and trying to make it in New York's restaurant scene. "And you were aware of the circumstances that led to her leaving New York?" Sophia's expression hardened. "You mean when Derek Chen destroyed her career with fabricated health violations and stolen her professional reputation? Yes, I was aware. Did Miss Ellis ever express interest in revenge against Mr. Chen?" "She expressed interest in clearing her name and rebuilding her career," Sophia said carefully. "Raven isn't the revenge type. She's the prove them wrong by succeeding type." Detective Kim showed her another photograph, this one of Derek in handcuffs being led into a federal facility. "Chen was arrested 6 hours ago," Kim said, "along with 17 other individuals connected to the money laundering and political corruption network." Sophia felt a surge of satisfaction. "Good. But there's a problem," Agent Thompson continued. "Chen is claiming that he was acting under duress, that Korean organized crime figures threatened his family if he didn't cooperate with their money laundering operations. And people believe that? Some people might," Prosecutor Chen said. "Especially if Chen can produce evidence that suggests Mrs. Han Park was the real mastermind behind the operation." Sophia stared at them. "You think Mrs. Han set this whole thing up?" "We think Mrs. Han is a very intelligent woman who's been playing a complex game for several years," Agent Thompson replied. "The question is whether she's been playing to expose the corruption or to control it." Detective Kim's phone rang. She answered in Korean, spoke rapidly for several minutes, then hung up with a grim expression. "Maya Ellis just provided us with digital evidence that changes everything," Kim announced. "What kind of evidence?" Kim pulled out her laptop and opened a series of files. Maya hacked into Derek's encrypted communications going back 3 years. Everything is here. Payments to politicians, instructions from organized crime figures, and most importantly, communications that prove Mrs. Han was never involved with the criminal conspiracy. Sophia leaned forward to look at the screen. What do you mean? Mrs. Han has been working with federal authorities since 2022, Kim explained, scrolling through what looked like email exchanges between Mrs. Han and various government officials. She discovered the money laundering operation, reported it to the FBI, and has been serving as an undercover informant for 3 years. She's been pretending to be a criminal? She's been pretending to cooperate with criminals while gathering evidence to destroy them, Agent Thompson corrected. It's one of the most sophisticated long-term operations in organized crime task force history. Prosecutor Chen was reading through printed copies of the communications. According to this, Mrs. Han identified Derek as a threat to her family's legitimate business, discovered his connections to Korean organized crime, and volunteered to help federal authorities build a case against the entire network. So when Derek kidnapped Maya, he was walking into a trap that had been 3 years in the making, Detective Kim finished. Mrs. Han knew about the kidnapping before it happened because she's been monitoring Derek's communications for months. Sophia felt pieces of a complex puzzle clicking into place. That's why she showed up so fast when Maya was taken. She wasn't reacting to the crisis. She was ready for it. The federal raid tonight wasn't a rescue operation, Agent Thompson said. It was the culmination of the longest undercover operation in Chicago organized crime task force history. What about Raven? Does she know? Not yet, Kim replied. Mrs. Han wanted to make sure the entire network was dismantled before revealing her role in the investigation. She didn't want to risk Derek or his associates escaping if they realized they were being monitored by federal authorities. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and smiled for the first time in hours. It's from Raven, she announced. Maya safe. Derek arrested. Coming to get you now. P.S. Mrs. Han is apparently a badass undercover federal informant. Who knew? The room erupted in laughter. The kind of relieved, exhausted laughter that comes after surviving something genuinely dangerous. One more question, Miss Martinez, Prosecutor Chen said. Are you willing to testify in open court about what you witnessed tonight? Sophia thought about her destroyed bar, about 3 years of building a life that had been incinerated in minutes by men who saw her as disposable. She thought about Raven crying at 3 a.m. after Derek had stolen her dreams the first time. She thought about Maya, 16 years old and brilliant, who deserved to grow up in a world where criminals couldn't destroy families for profit. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure these people never hurt anyone else, Sophia said firmly. Detective Kim stood and extended her hand. Miss Martinez, on behalf of the Chicago Police Department and the Federal Organized Crime Task Force, thank you for your courage tonight. As they shook hands, Sophia realized that losing her bar was a small price to pay for the satisfaction of knowing that Derek Chen and 17 politicians would be spending the next several decades in federal prison. And when she opened her next restaurant, because there would definitely be a next restaurant, she'd name a dish after this night. Something spicy, something with bite, something that left a lasting impression. She was thinking maybe Sophia's Revenge. A dish that looked simple but delivered complex, unexpected flavors that lingered long after the meal was finished. Just like Justice. The penthouse apartment that had served as Raven and Maya's temporary safe house was empty when federal agents arrived at 6:47 a.m., but not abandoned. Someone had left it with methodical precision, taking only essential items and leaving everything else arranged as if the occupants had simply stepped out for coffee. Agent Thompson walked through rooms that still smelled like expensive takeout and teenage rebellion, noting the absence of personal belongings, but the presence of something more troubling. Signs that the departure had been rushed despite its apparent organization. The beds are made, but there are coffee cups still warm on the counter, he reported into his radio. Electronics are gone, but furniture and luggage remain. This wasn't planned. Detective Kim emerged from the master bedroom holding a handwritten note in Korean. Message from Mrs. Han. She says they're safe but had to leave because the location was compromised. Compromised how? Derek's people weren't the only ones monitoring federal communications, Kim translated. Someone else knew about the safe house. Agent Thompson felt ice in his stomach. Someone else? Mrs. Han thinks there's another faction involved. People who want the Korean organized crime network intact because it's profitable for them too. The radio crackled with an incoming message from the command center. Thompson, we have a problem. Mrs. Han Park's cell phone went offline at 6:23 a.m. Last ping was from a location in Chinatown, but when units arrived, they found her phone abandoned in an alley. Kim and Thompson exchanged glances. Where are Raven and Maya? Unknown. They were supposed to check in with federal marshals at 7 a.m. for their witness protection briefing. They never showed. 3 miles away, in the basement of a legitimate Korean-American cultural center that had been purchased 6 months earlier by shell companies connected to federal infrastructure contracts, Mrs. Han Park sat in a metal chair facing 3 men who'd made the mistake of underestimating a 70-year-old Korean matriarch. Her hands were zip-tied, but her posture remained regal, her expression calm despite the circumstances. Mrs. Han had survived Japanese occupation, Korean War, immigration to America with nothing but determination and a brilliant husband, and 40 years of building a legitimate business empire in a country that didn't always welcome Korean success stories. 3 criminal idiots with guns were not going to be the thing that broke her. Mrs. Park, the man in the expensive suit said in Korean-accented English. You've caused us significant problems. Senator Walsh, Mrs. Han replied in perfectly modulated English. You've caused yourselves significant problems. I merely documented them. Senator Walsh, who'd built his political career on supporting Asian American business initiatives while secretly taking bribes to protect criminal operations, paced the small room like a caged predator. 3 years of work, Mrs. Park. 3 years of carefully constructed political relationships, regulatory exemptions, and infrastructure contracts worth $50 billion, all destroyed because you couldn't mind your own business. My business was being used to launder your criminal profits, Mrs. Han said calmly. That made it very much my business. The second man, whom Mrs. Han recognized as Michael Kim from the federal surveillance photos, spoke in rapid Korean to his companion. Mrs. Han listened with interest, her expression never changing despite the increasingly violent nature of their discussion. They're debating whether to kill me immediately or use me as leverage against my son, she said conversationally to Senator Walsh. You speak Korean? I was born in Seoul, you ignorant man. Of course I speak Korean. Mrs. Han's voice carried the particular contempt reserved for politicians who forgot that their constituents might be more intelligent than they were. I also speak enough criminal to understand that you're in panic mode because Derek Chen has been providing federal authorities with detailed information about your operation for the past 6 hours. Walsh's face went pale. That's impossible. Chen doesn't know enough to— Chen knows everything, Mrs. Han interrupted. Because I made sure he knew everything. For 3 years, I fed him information about legitimate park hospitality operations, let him think he was successfully infiltrating our business, while federal authorities monitored every communication he made to his criminal associates. The truth was settling over Walsh like a suffocating blanket. You're saying this entire operation was a federal sting? I'm saying that Derek Chen, Michael Kim, James Park, and 17 politicians have been building a criminal case against themselves while thinking they were committing the perfect crimes, Mrs. Han replied. Every meeting, every wire transfer, every corrupt vote, all documented by federal authorities. Michael Kim said something sharp in Korean that made his companion step back. What did he say? Walsh demanded. He said that killing me won't solve their problems because the federal case doesn't depend on my testimony, Mrs. Han translated. He also said that you're an idiot for bringing them into a federal sting operation without proper intelligence. But Derek was arrested. Derek was arrested because his role in the sting was finished, Mrs. Han said patiently. He's not facing criminal charges, Senator. He's entering witness protection after 3 years of exemplary cooperation with federal authorities. The words hit Walsh like physical blows. Derek hadn't been the mastermind of a criminal conspiracy. He'd been an undercover federal informant gathering evidence against the conspiracy. That means, Walsh said slowly, that everything we told him, every plan we shared, was immediately reported to federal authorities, Mrs. Hahn confirmed, including your plan to eliminate Raven Ellis and her daughter to prevent their testimony. Walsh pulled out his gun, his hands shaking with rage and panic. Then you're all going to disappear. No witnesses, no testimony, no case. Mrs. Hahn smiled with the serene confidence of someone who'd been planning for this exact moment for 3 years. Senator, you've made one critical error in your calculations. Which is? You assumed that I came here alone. The basement door exploded inward as federal agents poured into the room, followed by Detective Kim and what looked like half the Chicago Police Department's organized crime unit. Senator Walsh, Agent Thompson announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, political corruption, and kidnapping a federal informant. As the handcuffs clicked around Walsh's wrists, Mrs. Hahn looked up at Detective Kim with satisfaction. The tracking device worked perfectly, she said in Korean. Tracking device? Agent Thompson asked. Mrs. Hahn showed him her watch, an elegant piece that looked like expensive jewelry but was actually sophisticated federal surveillance equipment. Mrs. Park has been wearing federal monitoring devices for 3 years, Detective Kim explained. We've known her location constantly since 2022. So when she was kidnapped, we followed the signal directly here and watched Senator Walsh incriminate himself with kidnapping, threats, and detailed confessions about the entire criminal operation, Kim said. Mrs. Park just gave us enough evidence to prosecute this case for the next 20 years. As the arrested men were led away, Mrs. Hahn stood and straightened her clothes with the dignity of someone who'd just concluded the most successful undercover operation in Chicago federal law enforcement history. Agent Thompson, she said, I believe it's time to reunite me with my family. Where are Raven and Maya? Mrs. Hahn's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Where they've been for the past 8 hours. In a federal facility giving depositions that will put the remaining members of this network in prison for life. They were never in danger? They were in the safest place in Chicago, Mrs. Hahn replied. Federal witness protection. I just needed Senator Walsh to believe they were vulnerable, so he'd make enough mistakes to complete our case against him. Agent Thompson shook his head in admiration. Mrs. Park, remind me never to play poker with you. Agent Thompson, Mrs. Hahn said as they walked toward the exit. After 40 years in American business and 3 years as a federal informant, I don't play poker. What do you play? Chess. And I just achieved checkmate. The 42nd floor of the Park Hospitality building had never felt more like enemy territory as Junho stood in his own boardroom, facing 12 executives who'd built their careers in his family's company and were now staring at him like he'd personally betrayed each of them. The morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated faces that ranged from confused to angry, to something that looked disturbingly like hostile calculation. Ladies and gentlemen, Junho began, his voice carrying the authority he'd inherited along with the business empire. I'm sure you have questions about the federal arrests that occurred last night. Questions? David Park, no relation, despite the shared surname, slammed a copy of the Chicago Tribune on the mahogany conference table. The headline read, Korean Hospitality Empire Linked to Federal Money Laundering Investigation. Junho, the FBI raided 17 of our locations. They seized financial records going back 5 years. The stock price dropped 30% in the first hour of trading. The federal investigation targeted criminal activities that were conducted without the knowledge or consent of Park Hospitality's legitimate operations, Junho replied calmly. We are victims of criminal infiltration, not participants in criminal conspiracy. Sarah Kim, the company's chief financial officer, opened her laptop and displayed a series of financial charts on the room's main screen. Junho, we've lost 4 major contracts since the news broke this morning. she reported. The Marriott partnership is under review. 3 city councils have suspended our municipal catering contracts pending investigation. We're looking at potential losses in excess of $200 million, which is exactly what the criminals who infiltrated our company intended, Junho said. They wanted to destroy Park Hospitality's reputation so they could acquire our assets at bankruptcy prices. And what's your plan to prevent that? Asked Marcus Chen, Derek's cousin, though he'd been carefully vetted by federal authorities and found to have no knowledge of his relative's criminal activities. Junho pulled out his phone and displayed a video call screen showing his mother, Agent Thompson, and Detective Kim in what looked like a federal conference room. The plan, Mrs. Han said from the screen, is to explain to our employees exactly what happened and why Park Hospitality will emerge from this investigation stronger than ever. The boardroom erupted in surprised murmurs. Mrs. Han had been reported missing by several news outlets, and her sudden appearance via video conference raised more questions than it answered. Mother, Junho said, perhaps you should start from the beginning. Mrs. Han's expression was serene despite the circumstances. 3 years ago, I discovered that Derek Chen was using Park Hospitality accounts to launder money for Korean organized crime figures. Instead of simply firing him and hoping the problem would disappear, I contacted federal authorities and volunteered to help build a comprehensive case against the entire criminal network. David Park leaned forward. You've been working with federal authorities for 3 years? I've been serving as an undercover federal informant for 3 years, Mrs. Han corrected. Every meeting Derek attended, every criminal transaction he conducted, every politician he bribed, all of it was monitored and documented by federal law enforcement. Sarah Kim was taking notes rapidly. So the money laundering charges will result in the complete exoneration of Park Hospitality and the recovery of approximately $70 million in stolen funds, Agent Thompson said, appearing beside Mrs. Han on the screen. Mrs. Park's cooperation has enabled us to prosecute the largest political corruption case in Illinois history. Marcus Chen raised his hand like a student. What about the negative publicity? The news reports are making it sound like our entire company is criminal. The news reports are based on incomplete information, Detective Kim replied. Within 48 hours, we'll be releasing detailed evidence showing that Park Hospitality was the victim of criminal infiltration, not a participant in criminal activity. Mrs. Park's heroic cooperation with federal authorities will be front-page news by Thursday. Junho watched his executives processing this information, their expressions shifting from concern to relief to something approaching admiration for his mother's 3-year investigation. Furthermore, Mrs. Han continued, the federal government will be issuing a public commendation for Park Hospitality's cooperation in exposing political corruption. Several government contracts that were previously awarded to companies connected to the criminal network will be transferred to legitimate businesses, including ours. How much are we talking about? Sarah Kim asked. Conservative estimate? $400 million in federal contracts over the next 5 years, Agent Thompson replied. Park Hospitality's reputation for integrity and cooperation with law enforcement makes you an attractive partner for government agencies. The boardroom atmosphere had completely transformed. Where 10 minutes earlier there had been panic and recrimination, now there was excitement and renewed confidence in the company's future. There is one more thing, Junho said, his voice becoming more personal. The federal investigation brought someone into our lives who will be joining Park Hospitality in a significant capacity. He clicked a button on his phone, and Raven's face appeared on the screen beside Mrs. Han and the federal agents. She was clearly in some kind of official building, but she looked rested and determined. This is Raven Ellis, Junho announced. Former executive chef at Meridian in Manhattan, James Beard nominee, and the woman whose courage in warning federal authorities about Derek's criminal activities made this entire investigation possible. Raven smiled at the camera. Good morning, everyone. I'm looking forward to working with you. Ms. Ellis will be serving as executive chef for our new flagship restaurant, Mrs. Han said. and as Director of Culinary Operations for our expansion into federal government catering contracts. David Park looked confused. Federal government catering? The Department of Defense has asked Park Hospitality to bid on catering contracts for military installations across the Midwest, Agent Thompson explained. Ms. Ellis's background in high-volume, high-quality food service makes her uniquely qualified to oversee these operations. Sarah Kim was already calculating numbers. Military contracts are typically very stable, very profitable, and very prestigious, Mrs. Han added. Park Hospitality will be the first Korean-American company to hold major DoD catering contracts. As the video conference ended and the executives filed out of the boardroom, buzzing with excitement about the company's unexpected transformation from scandal victim to federal government partner, Jun-ho remained behind to process what had just occurred. His mother had orchestrated not just the destruction of a criminal network, but the elevation of Park Hospitality to a new level of American business legitimacy. The woman who'd been kidnapped 12 hours earlier had just announced a partnership with the Department of Defense. And Raven, the disgraced chef who'd been serving coffee in a rundown diner 2 days earlier, was now positioned to become one of the most influential Korean-American culinary figures in federal government contracting. Junho's phone rang. Raven's number. "How are you feeling about becoming Director of Culinary Operations for a company you'd never heard of 3 days ago?" he asked without preamble. "I'm feeling like your mother is the most terrifying strategic genius I've ever encountered," Raven replied, laughing. "And I'm feeling like Maya and I finally have a chance to build the life we should have had 3 years ago. And how are you feeling about me?" The line was quiet for a moment. "I'm feeling like I'd like to have dinner with you. Somewhere we can actually talk without federal agents, organized crime figures, or kidnapping attempts." "I know a place," Junho said. "Very quiet, very private. The food is excellent, and the company is even better." "Where?" "My kitchen. I'll cook for you." Raven's laughter was warm and genuine. "Junho Park, after everything we've been through, you still haven't seen me actually cook." "Then it's time," he said. "We'll cook together." As Chicago stretched out below his office windows, Junho realized that the criminal conspiracy that had threatened to destroy his family had instead brought them everything they'd been missing: justice, love, and a future that looked nothing like anything they'd planned, but everything like what they'd always wanted. Derek's betrayal had been the catalyst for the best thing that had ever happened to any of them. The Federal Witness Protection Facility had Wi-Fi that was surprisingly fast for a government building, which Maya Ellis discovered within minutes of being given access to a secured laptop for educational purposes during your temporary stay. What the federal agents didn't realize was that Maya's idea of education involved teaching their cybersecurity systems about vulnerabilities they never knew they had. "Maya," Detective Kim said, finding the 16-year-old in the facility's common room at 2 a.m., surrounded by printed documents and multiple laptop screens. "Normal people sleep at this hour. Normal people don't have criminal fathers and federal informant grandmothers," Maya replied without looking up from the code she was writing. "Also, your network security has more holes than Swiss cheese." Detective Kim sat down across from her, noting the impressive array of financial records, communication logs, and what appeared to be architectural blueprints spread across 3 tables. "What are you working on?" "Evidence," Maya said simply. Derek's criminal network didn't just target restaurants and politicians. They were building something bigger. She turned her laptop screen so Detective Kim could see what looked like a complex organizational chart connecting dozens of companies, government contracts, and financial institutions. "Maya, you're supposed to be resting and recovering from trauma, not conducting independent federal investigations." "I am resting," Maya said. "This is what I do to relax. Besides, I found something the FBI missed." Detective Kim leaned forward with interest. "What did you find?" Maya clicked through several screens of financial data. Derek's money laundering operation was phase 1 of a larger plan. They weren't just stealing money. They were positioning themselves to control federal infrastructure contracts worth billions of dollars. "We know about the infrastructure contracts. But you don't know about the endgame," Maya said, pulling up what looked like architectural plans for a massive construction project. Look at this. The plans showed a proposed high-speed rail system connecting Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis, a project worth an estimated $150 billion in federal funding. Derek's people have been systematically acquiring the construction companies, engineering firms, and political influence necessary to control every aspect of this rail project, Maya continued. The restaurant money laundering was just seed money for a much larger scheme. Detective Kim was taking notes rapidly. How did you access these plans? I may have accidentally stumbled into Derek's encrypted cloud storage while researching his financial connections, Maya said with the innocent expression that had been getting her into trouble since elementary school. Technically, I was just trying to recover family photos that belonged to my mother. Maya. Okay, fine. I hacked his entire digital life and downloaded everything he's ever accessed, created, or communicated, Maya admitted. But in my defense, he kidnapped me, so I consider it self-defense with a keyboard. Detective Kim was studying the rail project plans. Maya, this changes everything. If you're right about the scope of this conspiracy, I'm right, Maya said firmly. And there's more. She pulled up another screen, showing what appeared to be surveillance photos of various politicians, business leaders, and government officials. Derek's people have been gathering blackmail material on everyone involved in federal infrastructure funding for the past 5 years, Maya explained. Politicians who took bribes, construction executives who submitted fraudulent bids, government officials who accepted gifts in exchange for regulatory approvals. They were building a network of compromised officials. They were building a shadow government, Maya corrected. Look at this. The next screen showed a timeline of planned accidents and scandals that would eliminate honest politicians and replace them with compromised ones who would approve the rail project funding. Maya, this is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. Which is why I've been awake for 18 hours making copies of everything and sending them to every federal agency I can think of, Maya said. I may have also accidentally sent everything to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and 3 congressional oversight committees. Detective Kim stared at her. You did what? Look, Mom always taught me that when you have evidence of corruption, you don't sit on it hoping someone else will do the right thing, Maya said. You make sure everyone knows about it so the bad guys can't cover it up or make it disappear. Maya, you may have just triggered the largest federal investigation in decades. Good, Maya said firmly. Because Derek and his people destroyed my family once, and they were planning to destroy hundreds of families to steal billions of dollars. Someone needed to stop them. Detective Kim's phone was ringing constantly now. She glanced at the caller ID. FBI headquarters, Department of Justice, congressional offices, and news organizations. Maya, you realize that what you've done tonight is going to change everything? I realize that Derek made a fundamental error when he kidnapped me, Maya replied, finally shutting down her laptops. He assumed I was just some scared kid who wouldn't fight back. And instead, he kidnapped the daughter of a woman who taught me never to accept injustice quietly, and the granddaughter of a woman who spent 3 years building a federal case against organized crime, Maya said with a smile that would have made Mrs. Hahn proud. He really should have done better research on our family. Detective Kim's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed FBI Director. Maya, I think you should probably call your mother. Already did. Mom's on her way here with Junho and enough federal agents to arrest half of Chicago, Maya said. Also, I think I accidentally started a congressional investigation into high-speed rail funding. Accidentally? Okay, totally on purpose, Maya admitted. But Mom always says that if you're going to do something, do it completely. As Detective Kim answered her phone to what sounded like very excited FBI officials, Maya looked out the window at Chicago's skyline and thought about the rail project that would never be built with stolen money, the politicians who would never get the chance to sell out their constituents, and the construction workers who would get honest jobs on legitimate projects, instead of being exploited by criminal enterprises. Derek had kidnapped her thinking she was a weakness he could use against her family. Instead, Maya Ellis had just become the 16-year-old who brought down the largest federal corruption scheme in American history. Not bad for a night's work. The Park Hospitality Test Kitchen at 5 a.m. was Raven Ellis's natural element, stainless steel surfaces that reflected her determined expression, professional-grade equipment that responded to her touch like instruments she'd been born to play, and the kind of pristine workspace that represented everything she'd lost and was now reclaiming. She stood in the center of the space that would become her command center, mentally cataloging each station, each tool, each possibility. Maya sat at the chef's table with her laptop open, surrounded by printed federal contracts and what looked like organizational charts for the Department of Defense catering operations she'd somehow accessed without authorization. "Mom," Maya said without looking up from her screen, "do you realize you're about to become responsible for feeding 40,000 federal employees across 12 states?" "I'm aware," Raven replied, testing the gas burners on the 8-station range that could probably cook for an army. "The question is whether I can scale my techniques from serving 200 covers a night to serving 40,000 meals a day." "The math isn't the hard part," Junho said, entering the kitchen with arms full of supply catalogs and what appeared to be blueprints for commercial kitchen installations. "The hard part is maintaining quality and consistency across operations that span from Chicago to Denver." Raven turned to face him, noting the exhaustion around his eyes, but also the excitement that came from building something unprecedented. "How many kitchens are we talking about?" 17 federal facilities, 8 military bases, and 4 congressional office buildings," he replied, spreading the blueprints across the chef's table. "Each location needs standardized equipment, trained staff, and menu systems that can accommodate everything from routine meals to state dinners." "State dinners?" "The Department of Defense was impressed with your background and Maya's digital evidence about the previous corruption," Junho explained. "They want Park Hospitality to bid on White House catering support as well." Maya looked up from her laptop with the expression of someone who'd just solved a particularly complex puzzle. "Mom, I've been analyzing federal food service contracts, and there's something you need to understand about what we're really building here." "Which is?" "This isn't just about replacing Derek's criminal operation," Maya said, turning her laptop screen toward them. "This is about creating the largest Korean-American food service company in federal government history." The screen showed revenue projections, facility requirements, and staffing needs that were staggering in their scope. Raven was looking at the blueprint for a culinary empire that would employ thousands of people and serve millions of meals annually. "Maya, how did you access federal budget projections?" "I may have accidentally stumbled into the Department of Defense procurement database while researching educational opportunities for underprivileged teenagers," Maya said, with the innocent expression that fooled absolutely no one. "But the important thing is what I found." She clicked through several screens of data. "Korean food is having a moment in American culture right now. Korean restaurant locations increased 10% in the last year alone. Federal facilities are specifically requesting Korean fusion options for their meal programs." "So, we're not just filling Derek's old contracts," Raven realized. "We're expanding into a market that's actively seeking what we can provide." "Exactly," Junho said. "Mrs. Han's 3-year federal cooperation has given Park Hospitality unprecedented credibility with government agencies. We're not just another food service company. We're the company that helped expose and eliminate federal corruption." Raven walked to the center of the kitchen, studying the equipment that represented her future. Professional convection ovens that could handle volume she'd never imagined, prep stations designed for efficiency and safety, storage systems that could support supply chains spanning multiple states. "What's our timeline?" 6 weeks, Junho said. 6 weeks to hire and train kitchen staff for 17 locations, standardize menu systems, establish supply chains, and pass federal inspections that will determine whether we get the contracts. 6 weeks, Raven repeated, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with impossible deadlines and high stakes. "What's our budget?" $12 million for initial setup, he replied. with potential revenues of $400 million annually if we secure all the contracts we're bidding for. Maya was still typing rapidly. I've been researching successful federal food service operations, and there are 3 critical factors that determine success or failure, which are quality consistency across multiple locations, supply chain reliability under government regulations, and staff training programs that meet federal security clearance requirements. Maya read from her screen. Mom, some of these facilities require background checks that go back 15 years. Raven laughed, the sound echoing off the stainless steel surfaces like music. Maya, after everything we've been through, I think we can handle federal background checks. There's one more thing, Junho said, his expression becoming more serious. The federal contracts come with requirements that go beyond food service, such as cultural programming. The Department of Defense wants Korean American cultural education integrated into the meal programs at military bases, he explained. Cooking demonstrations, cultural exchange events, educational presentations about Korean American contributions to American society. Raven stared at him. They want us to be cultural ambassadors as well as food service providers. They want us to be the Korean American success story that demonstrates how immigration and cultural integration strengthen American institutions, Maya said, reading from what appeared to be official government documents. Mom, this is bigger than restaurants. This is about representing our community on a national stage. The weight of that responsibility settled over Raven like a mantle she'd never expected to wear. 3 days ago, she'd been serving coffee in a rundown diner, invisible to the powerful people who shaped American policy. Now she was being asked to represent Korean American excellence to federal agencies across 12 states. Can we do this? She asked quietly. We can do this, Junho said firmly. But we need to start now, and we need to start with a plan that addresses every aspect of federal food service operations. Raven pulled out her phone and opened the note-taking app that had helped her organize kitchen operations for 15 years. Maya, I need you to create a database of every federal facility we're contracting with. Equipment specs, staffing requirements, security protocols, dietary restrictions, and cultural programming expectations. Already started, Maya replied, showing her a spreadsheet that looked comprehensive enough to manage a small city. Junho, I need you to identify the best Korean American chefs in the Midwest, Raven continued, her mind shifting into the strategic planning mode that had once made her one of New York's most respected executive chefs. People with federal security clearance potential, people who understand both traditional Korean techniques and American palates. What about menu development? Raven smiled, the expression of someone who'd found her true calling after years of settling for survival. Leave that to me. I'm going to create a Korean fusion menu system that makes federal employees look forward to lunch every single day. As the sun rose over Chicago, illuminating the test kitchen that would become the command center for the largest Korean American food service operation in federal government history, Raven Ellis began planning the culinary empire that would prove Derek Chen's greatest mistake had been underestimating the woman he'd tried to destroy. But this time, she wouldn't be building alone. This time, she had family. The penthouse elevator ascended through 47 floors of Chicago's most exclusive building, with the smooth inevitability of justice finally arriving at its destination. Derek Chen stood between 2 federal marshals, his hands cuffed behind his back, his expensive suit wrinkled from 12 hours in federal custody. But his eyes still carried the arrogant calculation of someone who believed he could manipulate his way out of any situation. You know, Derek said conversationally to Marshal Rodriguez, Raven Ellis has a history of mental instability. The stress of her failed restaurant, her daughter's behavioral problems, the financial pressures. Anyone could snap under that kind of pressure. Save it for your lawyer, Rodriguez replied without interest. The elevator doors opened to reveal the penthouse that had served as Mrs. Han Park's private office during her 3 years as a federal informant. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, but Derek's attention was immediately focused on the woman sitting behind a mahogany desk, that had witnessed the planning of the most successful organized crime investigation in Illinois history. Mrs. Han Park looked up from the documents she was signing, federal testimony that would ensure Derek spent the next 30 years in prison, and smiled with the serene satisfaction of someone whose patience had been rewarded with complete victory. "Derek," she said pleasantly, "thank you for coming." "I didn't exactly have a choice," Derek replied, his voice carrying the sullen anger of someone who'd finally realized how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. "No," Mrs. Han agreed. "You didn't." She gestured to a chair across from her desk. The marshals seated Derek but remained standing, their presence a clear reminder of his changed circumstances. "Mrs. Han," Derek began, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had once convinced politicians to accept bribes and women to trust him with their lives. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about my role in this operation." "No misunderstanding, Mrs. Han replied, opening a thick folder filled with photographs, financial records, and transcripts. "You've been working for Korean organized crime figures since 2019, using your position at Park Hospitality to launder money and recruit corrupt politicians. I was coerced. You married Raven Ellis in 2018, stole her identity information during the divorce proceedings, used that information to create shell companies for money laundering, then systematically destroyed her career to prevent her from discovering your criminal activities," Mrs. Han continued, reading from what appeared to be a federal indictment. "You repeated this pattern with 4 other women, 2 of whom died by suicide after you destroyed their lives." Derek's facade was cracking. "You can't prove any of that." Mrs. Han turned her computer monitor toward him, displaying a video conference screen that showed Agent Thompson, Detective Kim, and several other federal officials. "Derek," Agent Thompson said from the screen, "we have 3 years of recorded conversations between you and your criminal associates. We have financial records showing money laundering through Park Hospitality accounts. We have testimony from 17 politicians describing bribes they received from you. We have digital evidence provided by your daughter Maya showing the scope of your infrastructure fraud conspiracy. My daughter is a troubled teenager. Your daughter is a genius who provided federal authorities with evidence of criminal conspiracies worth over $100 billion, Detective Kim interrupted. Evidence that will result in the prosecution of the largest political corruption case in American history." Mrs. Han leaned forward, her expression becoming more personal. "Derek, do you know what you've accomplished?" "What?" "You've given my son the love of his life, my family the daughter and granddaughter we never knew we needed, and the federal government the evidence necessary to eliminate Korean organized crime influence from American infrastructure projects," she said. "Your criminal conspiracy has resulted in the creation of the largest legitimate Korean-American business success story in federal contracting history." The words hit Derek like physical blows as he began to understand the scope of his miscalculations. Raven Ellis is now the director of culinary operations for federal food service contracts worth $400 million annually, Mrs. Han continued. Maya Ellis is being courted by MIT, Stanford, and the FBI's cybersecurity division. My son has found happiness with a woman whose courage and integrity match his own. That's impossible. Senator Walsh has been arrested for conspiracy, money laundering, and attempted murder, Agent Thompson reported from the screen. Congressman Martinez is cooperating with federal authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. Michael Kim and James Park are facing life sentences for organized crime activity. The Korean organized crime network you worked for has been completely dismantled, Detective Kim added. 18 businesses, 43 individuals, and 12 government contracts have been seized or terminated. Derek was staring at Mrs. Han with dawning comprehension. You planned this, all of it. The federal investigation, Raven warning Junho, Maya's kidnapping. You orchestrated everything. I orchestrated nothing, Mrs. Han corrected. I simply documented your criminal activities and allowed federal authorities to observe your choices. You chose to destroy women's lives for profit. You chose to steal from legitimate businesses. You chose to corrupt American political institutions. You chose to kidnap your own daughter when your crimes were exposed. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. I simply ensured that your choices had consequences. And Raven? Did she know? Raven Ellis knew nothing about the federal investigation until after Maya's rescue, Mrs. Hahn said. Her decision to warn my son about your criminal activities was made entirely independently, based on her own moral character and courage. The elevator doors opened again, and Raven entered with Maya and Jun-ho. Derek hadn't seen his ex-wife in 3 years, and the transformation was startling. Gone was the defeated woman whose career he'd destroyed, replaced by someone who carried herself with the confidence of professional success and personal happiness. "Hello, Derek," Raven said calmly. "Raven." Derek's voice cracked slightly. "I want you to know that I never meant for any of this to hurt you or Maya. You destroyed my restaurant, stole my identity, ruined my reputation, and kidnapped our daughter." Raven replied matter-of-factly. "What did you think would happen? I was trying to protect you. You were protecting yourself," Maya interrupted, stepping forward with the fearless directness that had made her dangerous to criminals twice her age. "You used Mom's love for you to gather intelligence for your criminal operation, then discarded us when we became inconvenient." Derek looked at his daughter, brilliant, fierce, completely unafraid of him despite everything he'd done. "Maya, you have to understand. I understand that you're a criminal who destroys families for money, criminal purposes. That's not true." "Then why?" Maya continued, her voice becoming colder. "Did you have a second family in California that you were supporting with money stolen from Mom's restaurant?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Derek's face went completely white as he realized that Maya had uncovered everything. Not just his recent criminal activities, but the deeper pattern of deception that had defined his entire adult life. "Maya found your other family while researching your criminal network," Mrs. Hahn explained calmly. "Wife, 2 children, mortgage payments, private school tuition, all funded with money stolen from the women whose lives you destroyed." Derek was staring at Maya with something approaching terror. "How did you—" "I hacked your entire digital life, Dad," Maya said, the word dad carrying enough venom to kill. "Bank accounts, social media, dating profiles, business communications, personal emails, everything. Did you know you have 7 different social security numbers? Or that you've been married simultaneously to 3 different women?" Raven was looking at Derek with an expression of complete disgust. 7 identities? Derek Chen, Derek Yamamoto, David Kim, Daniel Park, Douglas Martinez, Darren Rodriguez, and Dale Wilson, Maya recited from memory. Each identity supported by stolen information from women he married and destroyed. Agent Thompson's voice came from the computer screen. "Derek, you're looking at federal charges that include identity theft, bigamy, money laundering, political corruption, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. Conservative estimate is life in prison without the possibility of parole." Derek had run out of lies, manipulation, and false charm. He sat in the chair facing the family he'd destroyed and tried to rebuild, seeing clearly for the first time the magnitude of his crimes and their consequences. "Raven," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." "No, Derek," Raven replied with finality. "You're caught." The marshals stood, indicating that the confrontation was over. As they prepared to escort Derek to federal prison, he looked one last time at Maya. "I did love you," he said desperately. "Both of you. That was real." Maya studied him with the analytical intelligence that had made her dangerous to his criminal empire. "Love doesn't destroy what it claims to care about," she said. "Love protects. Love builds. Love sacrifices for others instead of sacrificing others for itself." She walked to where Raven stood beside Jun-ho, creating a family unit that Derek would never be part of again. "What you did was possession, control, and exploitation," Maya continued. "But you taught me something important about what love actually looks like." "Which is?" Maya looked at Raven and Jun-ho, then back at Derek with finality. Love looks like Mom choosing to warn a stranger instead of protecting herself. Love looks like Mr. Junho risking everything to save people he barely knew. Love looks like Grandma Han spending 3 years building a federal case to protect her family. She paused, letting the words sink in. Love never looked like you. As the marshals escorted Derek toward the elevator that would take him to federal prison, Mrs. Han called out one final message. "Derek," she said, "thank you for bringing us together." The elevator doors closed on Derek Chen's face, and the penthouse fell silent except for the sound of Chicago wind against the windows and the quiet satisfaction of justice finally served. Raven turned to Junho and smiled, the expression of someone who'd reclaimed not just her career and her safety, but her faith in love itself. "So," she said, "ready to cook dinner for 40,000 federal employees?" "Ready to cook dinner for you," he replied, taking her hand. And as Maya rolled her eyes at the romantic moment, while simultaneously uploading Derek's final confession to 3 different federal databases, the Ellis Park family began planning their future together. A future that Derek's betrayal had made possible, but could never touch again. The test kitchen at 2 a.m. had transformed into something that resembled a war room more than a culinary workspace, with Maya's laptops displaying federal contract specifications alongside Raven's handwritten recipe notes and Junho's supply chain logistics spread across every available surface. What they were planning wasn't just menu development. It was the complete systematic replacement of Derek's criminal network with legitimate Korean-American business excellence. "Okay," Raven said, standing beside the 8-burner range with the focused intensity she'd once brought to James Beard Award competitions. "If we're going to serve 40,000 meals a day across 17 federal facilities, every dish needs to be foolproof, scalable, and memorable." Maya looked up from her laptop, where she was apparently designing digital ordering systems for government cafeterias. "Mom, I've been analyzing federal employee dietary preferences, and there's something you need to understand about revenge." "Revenge?" "This isn't just about replacing Derek's contracts," Maya explained, turning her screen to show what looked like comparative analysis charts. "This is about proving that everything Derek destroyed was valuable, everything he stole was precious, and everything he thought was worthless was actually powerful enough to build an empire." Raven felt a chill of recognition. "You want to use success as revenge." "I want to use excellence as justice," Maya corrected. "Derek thought he could destroy your career because he assumed you'd never recover. He thought he could steal from Mr. Junho's company because he assumed no one would notice. He thought he could corrupt American political institutions because he assumed no one cared enough to stop him." She clicked through several screens, showing the scope of their new federal contracts. "But what if we don't just succeed? What if we succeed so completely that Derek's name becomes synonymous with the stupidity of underestimating Korean-American business capabilities?" Junho was studying supply chain requirements for military-base kitchens. "Maya, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we name our federal food service program the Derek Chen Memorial Initiative for Korean-American Excellence," Maya said with a smile that would have made Mrs. Han proud. "Every meal served, every federal employee fed, every cultural program presented, all of it dedicated to the criminal whose stupidity made this success possible." Raven started laughing, the sound echoing off stainless steel surfaces like music. "Maya, that's the most passive-aggressive thing I've ever heard." "It's not passive-aggressive," Maya replied. "It's actively and aggressively honoring the fact that Derek's criminal conspiracy created the circumstances that allowed us to build something amazing." She pulled up what appeared to be mock promotional materials. "Think about it. Press releases announcing the Derek Chen Memorial Initiative. Congressional testimony about how criminal infiltration of Korean-American businesses led to unprecedented federal partnerships. Media interviews where Mom explains how Derek's attempt to destroy her career actually prepared her for federal food service management." Junho was grinning now. "So Derek becomes famous as the criminal whose stupidity enabled Korean-American business success. Derek becomes the cautionary tale that demonstrates why you should never underestimate Korean-American women," Raven said. feeling a satisfaction that was deeper and more complex than simple revenge. Maya opened another screen showing what looked like educational curriculum. And every cultural programming event we do for federal agencies includes a section about learning from criminal infiltration, using Derek's case study to teach government employees about recognizing and preventing corruption. You want to turn Derek into a teaching tool. I want to turn Derek into proof that Korean American families don't just survive attempts to destroy us, Maya said firmly. We transform attempts to destroy us into opportunities to build something better than anyone thought possible. Raven walked to her recipe notebooks, studying the menu development work that would feed federal employees from Chicago to Denver. But Maya's words had transformed her understanding of what they were actually creating. The flagship dish, she said quietly. What? Every menu needs a signature dish, something that represents the entire program, Raven explained, her mind racing through possibilities. It should be something that honors Korean tradition, while embracing American innovation. Something that tells the story of survival, transformation, and triumph. She pulled out a clean notebook and began sketching. Korean-style braised short ribs with American bourbon reduction, served over kimchi fried rice with farm-fresh vegetables. Traditional technique, premium American ingredients, familiar enough for federal employees who've never tried Korean food, sophisticated enough to represent Korean American culinary excellence. What do we call it? Junho asked. Raven looked at Maya, then at the windows overlooking Chicago where Derek Chen was spending his first night in federal prison, then back at her notebook where she was designing a dish that would represent the transformation of their family's greatest crisis into their greatest triumph. The Phoenix Bowl, she said simply. Korean tradition rising from American opportunity, stronger and more beautiful than ever before. Maya was already typing. The Phoenix Bowl, signature dish of the Derek Chen Memorial Initiative for Korean American Excellence. I love it. There's one more element. Mrs. Han's voice came from the kitchen doorway, where she stood with Agent Thompson and what appeared to be several congressional staff members. Mrs. Han, Raven said, how long have you been listening? Long enough to realize that my granddaughter has inherited the family gift for strategic thinking, Mrs. Han replied with approval. Agent Thompson has news about the broader implications of your federal contracts. Agent Thompson stepped forward with a folder full of official documents. The Department of Justice is recommending that Park Hospitality's cooperation in exposing federal corruption be recognized with a Presidential Medal of Freedom for contributions to American institutional integrity. Raven stared at him. Presidential Medal of Freedom? The Derek Chen investigation resulted in the largest federal corruption prosecution in Illinois history, Agent Thompson explained. 17 politicians, 43 criminal associates, and $12 billion in fraudulent contracts. The president wants to personally recognize the Korean American family whose courage made this investigation possible. One of the congressional staff members spoke up. Additionally, Congress is considering legislation that would establish the Korean American Business Integrity Initiative, using Park Hospitality as a model for federal minority business partnerships. Maya looked up from her laptop with excitement. So Derek's criminal conspiracy is going to result in federal legislation supporting Korean American businesses? Derek's criminal conspiracy is going to result in Korean American businesses becoming the federal government's preferred model for integrity and excellence, Mrs. Han said with satisfaction. Every criminal organization that tries to infiltrate American institutions will be compared to Derek's failure. Every successful minority business will be compared to Park Hospitality's triumph. Raven felt the weight of that responsibility, but also the exhilaration of realizing that their success would create opportunities for countless other Korean American families. The recipe for revenge, she said quietly, isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so successful that your enemies become footnotes in the story of your triumph. The recipe for revenge, Maya added, is making sure that everyone who tries to hurt Korean American families learns why that's the stupidest mistake they could possibly make. As dawn broke over Chicago, illuminating the test kitchen where they were planning menus that would feed federal employees across 12 states, Raven Ellis began writing recipes that would serve justice with every meal. The Derek Chen Memorial Initiative for Korean American Excellence was about to begin. And Derek would spend the next 30 years in prison, knowing that his greatest crime had been underestimating the family, whose love was stronger than his hatred, whose courage was deeper than his cowardice, and whose success would be more enduring than his failures. The Phoenix Bowl would be served in federal facilities across America, and every bite would be a reminder that Korean American families don't just survive attempts to destroy them. They transform those attempts into opportunities to soar. 6 months after Derek Chen's federal sentencing hearing, the Park Hospitality flagship restaurant occupied the entire ground floor of a downtown Chicago building that had once housed corrupt political meetings and was now the showcase for Korean American culinary excellence. The opening night reservation list included 3 senators, the mayor of Chicago, 2 federal judges, and 47 food critics who'd come to witness what the James Beard Foundation was calling the most anticipated restaurant debut in American culinary history. Raven Ellis stood in the center of the kitchen that represented everything she'd lost and reclaimed, watching her team of 12 Korean-American chefs prepare for a dinner service that would be reviewed by every major food publication in the country. The kitchen itself was a masterpiece of design and efficiency. Traditional Korean cooking stations integrated with American technique requirements, equipment sophisticated enough to handle both delicate traditional preparations and high-volume federal contract meals. "Chef Ellis?" her sous chef called from the pasta station. "The kimchi carbonara for table 12 is ready for your approval." Raven tasted the dish, Korean fermented vegetables integrated with classic Italian technique, familiar enough for American palates, but distinctly Korean in its bold, complex flavors. It was exactly what she'd envisioned when designing menus that would honor both cultures while creating something entirely new. "Perfect," she said. "Fire the Phoenix Bowl for table 8. The Phoenix Bowl had become more than a signature dish. It had become a symbol. Korean-style braised short ribs with American bourbon reduction, served over kimchi fried rice with farm-fresh vegetables sourced from Korean-American agricultural cooperatives. Every element told the story of immigration, integration, and transformation that defined their family's journey from crisis to triumph. Maya appeared beside her, 17 now, and wearing the black chef's coat that indicated her status as the restaurant's technology director and cultural programming coordinator. "Mom," Maya said, "the congressional delegation is here for the cultural presentation. Are you ready?" "Are you ready?" Raven asked, knowing that Maya's presentation about Korean American contributions to federal security and infrastructure would be the evening's most important moment. "I've been ready for this since Derek kidnapped me," Maya replied with a smile. "Time to show these politicians why Korean American families are the federal government's best partners." Through the kitchen's observation windows, Raven could see the dining room filled with the most powerful people in Chicago politics, all of them eager to be associated with the success story that had emerged from the Derek Chen corruption investigation. The transformation was complete, from disgraced chef to federal contractor to cultural ambassador, all within 12 months. 5 minutes to the cultural presentation, Junho announced, entering the kitchen wearing the tailored suit that had replaced his disguise of simple clothes and hidden wealth. He moved through the controlled chaos with the confidence of someone who'd learned that the most important business decisions were often made in kitchens rather than boardrooms. Mrs. Han Park followed behind him, elegant in a black silk dress that managed to look both traditional and thoroughly modern, carrying herself with the satisfaction of someone whose 3-year federal investigation had resulted in not just justice, but the elevation of her family to unprecedented prominence in American society. "The Secretary of Agriculture just arrived," Mrs. Han announced to Raven, "along with the head of the Small Business Administration and what appears to be half the Korean American Congressional Caucus. Are we ready for this?" Raven asked, feeling the familiar pre-service nerves that had accompanied every important dinner of her career, but magnified by the knowledge that tonight's success would determine whether Korean American cuisine would be permanently elevated in American fine dining. "We've been ready for this our entire lives," Maya said, checking her tablet where she'd prepared a presentation that would demonstrate how Korean-American businesses had become essential partners in federal infrastructure security. Derek thought he could destroy us by exposing our vulnerabilities. Instead, he taught us to turn our greatest challenges into our greatest strengths. The dining room erupted in applause as Maya walked out to address an audience that included some of the most powerful people in American government. Through the kitchen's sound system, Raven could hear her daughter's voice, confident, articulate, completely unafraid, explaining how the Derek Chen investigation had led to the most comprehensive federal minority business initiative in American history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya began. "6 months ago, my family was targeted by criminals who thought Korean-American businesses were easy victims. Tonight, I'm here to explain why that was the stupidest mistake they could have made." The audience laughed, but Raven could hear the underlying seriousness in Maya's presentation. This wasn't just about their family's success. This was about demonstrating that Korean-American businesses had become integral to American institutional security and excellence. The Derek Chen Memorial Initiative for Korean-American Excellence now serves 47,000 federal employees daily across 17 states, Maya continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd helped design the program from inception. But more importantly, it represents a new model for federal minority business partnerships based on integrity, innovation, and cultural integration. In the kitchen, Raven's team was executing the most complex dinner service of their careers. Traditional Korean dishes elevated to fine dining standards, served to an audience that would determine the future of Korean cuisine in American restaurants. Each plate represented not just culinary technique, but cultural diplomacy of the highest order. "Chef," her pastry chef called out, "the black sesame souffle for the secretary's table is ready. And the Korean pear tart with ginseng ice cream for Senator Walsh's party," added her guard manger, referring to the politician who'd replaced the corrupt official Derek had been bribing with a leader who'd become one of their strongest supporters. Through the kitchen windows, Raven watched Maya conclude her presentation to standing ovations and requests for meetings from federal officials who wanted to replicate the park hospitality model in their own agencies. The 16-year-old who'd been kidnapped by her criminal father had become a 17-year-old who was reshaping federal policy. "Mom," Maya said, returning to the kitchen with her face flushed from success and excitement, "the Department of Defense wants to expand our contracts to military bases in 23 states. The Small Business Administration wants to use us as the template for federal minority business integration. And MIT wants me to start college early to study cybersecurity and public policy." "And what do you want?" Raven asked, knowing that Maya's dreams had grown far beyond anything she'd imagined possible when they were struggling to pay rent in their cramped apartment. "I want to keep building what we started," Maya said firmly. "Derek tried to destroy Korean-American families for profit. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure that never happens to anyone else." As the evening continued and critics tasted dishes that would receive James Beard nominations within the year, Raven realized that their rebirth in the kitchen had been literal, as well as metaphorical. The space where she'd once been invisible, serving coffee to people who didn't see her worth, had become the stage for demonstrating Korean-American culinary excellence to the most powerful people in the country. "Final orders," Junho called out, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone whose business empire had grown from hospitality to cultural transformation. "The mayor's table wants another Phoenix Bowl, and Senator Kim's party is asking for the chef's tasting menu." Raven looked around the kitchen where her team was finishing the most successful dinner service in their careers, preparing food that honored their heritage while creating something uniquely American. Tomorrow, food critics would write reviews that established Korean cuisine as essential to American fine dining. Next week, federal contracts would be signed that made Korean-American businesses integral to government operations. Next month, Maya would start designing programs that would prevent other families from experiencing the trauma Derek had inflicted. But tonight, in this kitchen that represented everything they'd built from the ruins of everything Derek had destroyed, Raven Ellis was simply cooking the food she'd always been meant to cook, with her daughter beside her, her love supporting her, and her mother-in-law documenting everything for the federal investigation reports that would become the foundation for protecting Korean-American businesses for generations to come. The Phoenix Bowl was more than a signature dish. It was proof that Korean-American families don't just survive attempts to destroy them. They transform those attempts into opportunities to soar higher than anyone thought possible. Derek Chen had spent his life stealing from others. In the end, he'd given them everything they'd ever dreamed of having. The rooftop garden of the Park Hospitality building at midnight was Raven and Junho's sanctuary, a space 30 floors above the Chicago streets where they could finally talk without federal agents, food critics, or congressional delegations shaping their conversations. Maya was safely asleep in the penthouse apartment that had become their family home, her laptop still warm from late-night correspondence with MIT professors who wanted to recruit the 17-year-old who'd revolutionized federal cybersecurity protocols. Raven stood beside the herb garden she'd planted for the restaurant's microgreen program, her hands in the soil that represented everything solid and growing in their transformed lives. 6 months of success had taught her that happiness required tending, just like the Korean perilla and American basil that grew side by side in carefully balanced cooperation. The Washington Post review comes out tomorrow, Junho said, joining her beside the raised beds where traditional Korean vegetables grew, alongside ingredients that would appear on federal facility menus across 12 states. Are you nervous? I'm terrified, Raven admitted, laughing at her own honesty. Not of the review. The food speaks for itself. I'm terrified of what happens when we're not running toward a crisis anymore. Junho understood immediately. Their relationship had been forged in the crucible of criminal conspiracy, kidnapping, federal investigations, and restaurant openings that carried the weight of cultural representation. Now that the immediate dangers had passed and the business was thriving, they were faced with the entirely different challenge of building love during peacetime. Maya asked me something yesterday, he said, settling beside her on the bench that overlooked their city, transformed into a landscape of lights and possibilities. She wanted to know if we were going to get married. Raven felt her heart skip. What did you tell her? I told her that was between you and me, Junho replied. But then she said something that made me think. Which was? She said that after everything Derek put your family through, you deserved a love that was chosen freely, not created by crisis. She said you should marry someone because you want to build something together, not because circumstances forced you together. Raven turned to face him fully, studying the man who'd evolved from mysterious customer to undercover CEO to federal partner to the person who made her morning coffee exactly the way she liked it. Strong enough for a chef's hours, sweet enough to remind her that life could include pleasure as well as purpose. Maya's very wise, she said quietly. Maya's also very protective of you, Junho added. She made it clear that if I ever hurt you the way Derek did, she has sufficient cybersecurity skills to make my life very complicated. And how do you feel about that? I'm grateful, he said simply. You deserve people who will fight for you, even if one of them is a teenager who could probably hack the Pentagon if properly motivated. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Chicago spread out below them, like a map of their shared future. The restaurant industry that had once rejected Raven now celebrated her as a pioneer. The federal contracts that Derek had tried to steal were now generating revenue that supported Korean-American businesses across the Midwest. The family that Derek had tried to destroy had become stronger than any of them had imagined possible. I have something for you, Junho said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Raven's breath caught. Junho, it's not what you think, he said quickly, though his smile suggested it might be exactly what she thought. Or rather, it's not just what you think. He withdrew a small wooden box that looked handmade, carved with Korean symbols that seemed to represent growth, protection, and permanence. My father made this for my mother the year they immigrated to America, Junho explained. She kept her most precious things in it, the recipes she brought from Korea, the first dollar she earned from Park Hospitality, photographs of family members who didn't make the journey. Raven opened the box carefully. Inside, nestled in silk that had aged to a warm ivory, was a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen. Traditional Korean design integrated with contemporary American craftsmanship, featuring a stone that seemed to capture and reflect light like captured starfire. "It's not an engagement ring," Junho said, his voice carrying the careful precision of someone who'd thought deeply about every word. "It's a choice ring." "A choice ring?" "Maya was right that you deserve love chosen freely, not love created by crisis," he explained. "This ring means that I choose you, not because Derek's conspiracy brought us together, but because every day since then has shown me how lucky I am to love someone whose courage matches her kindness." Raven lifted the ring from its silk resting place, noting how it felt substantial, but not heavy, significant without being ostentatious. "It also means," Junho continued, "that if you choose to wear it, we're partners in everything. The business, the family, the responsibility of representing Korean American success to federal agencies, and whatever comes next." What comes next? Maya's college applications. Mrs. Han's plan to expand park hospitality into California and Texas. Your cookbook deal with the publisher who wants to document Korean American fusion cuisine. Congressional testimony about minority business development. Possible James Beard nominations. The usual quiet domestic life. Raven started laughing. The usual quiet domestic life of federal contractors and cultural ambassadors. The usual quiet domestic life of people who discovered they could build something beautiful together, even when the world was trying to tear them apart, Junho corrected. She slipped the ring onto her finger, noting how perfectly it fit, as if it had been waiting for her specifically, as if Mrs. Han had somehow known 30 years ago that this moment would come. "There's one more thing in the box," Junho said softly. Raven looked down to find a folded piece of paper covered in what looked like Mrs. Han's precise handwriting. "What is it?" "Read it." Raven unfolded the paper and found a letter written in English, but with Korean phrases interspersed that somehow made the message more complete. "My dear daughter-in-law, when I first learned about you, I investigated your background the way Korean mothers investigate anyone who might join their family. What I discovered was a woman who had survived betrayal with her integrity intact, who had raised a brilliant daughter while working 3 jobs, who had chosen courage over safety when it mattered most. Derek Chen thought he could destroy Korean American families by exploiting our vulnerabilities. Instead, he brought us a daughter whose strength makes our family stronger, a granddaughter whose brilliance makes our future brighter, and a love story that proves Korean American dreams are powerful enough to overcome any conspiracy. Welcome to our family, not because you needed saving, but because you make us complete. Sarangheo, I love you. Mrs. Han Park. P.S. Maya has already designed security protocols for your wedding. She says Derek taught her never to leave important events unprotected." Raven was crying now, the quiet, grateful tears of someone who'd never expected to be welcomed so completely into a family that had every reason to be cautious about trusting newcomers. "She wrote this 6 months ago," Junho said, "the day after we rescued Maya from Derek's warehouse. She said she knew then that you were family, but she wanted to wait until you'd had time to choose us freely." "And Maya's security protocols?" "Apparently involve background checks on all wedding vendors, encrypted guest communications, and what she calls anti-Derek measures that I'm afraid to ask about in detail." Raven looked at the ring catching starlight on her finger, at the letter that welcomed her into a family she'd found by accident and chosen on purpose, at the man whose love had been tested by federal investigations and proven stronger than any conspiracy. "Junho?" "Yes." "Yes." He kissed her then, 30 floors above the city where Derek Chen was serving a federal prison sentence, where Korean American restaurants were earning Michelin stars, where their daughter was dreaming of colleges that would help her change the world. Love after the war wasn't about healing from trauma. It was about building something so beautiful that the trauma became irrelevant. Derek had taught them about betrayal, corruption, and the cruelty of people who saw families as resources to exploit. But love after the war taught them about choosing each other every day, building dreams together, instead of surviving nightmares alone, and discovering that Korean American families who survive attempts to destroy them emerge stronger, wiser, and capable of transforming the world. The herb garden around them carried the sense of two cultures growing in harmony. The city below them sparkled with possibilities they'd never dared imagine. And somewhere in the penthouse, Maya Ellis Park was probably designing cybersecurity protocols for a wedding that would celebrate not just their love, but the victory of Korean American family values over every force that had tried to tear them apart. Love after the war was the best revenge of all. No. The first dinner together. 2 months after the engagement that made national news, Korean American business dynasty celebrates love born from federal investigation, as the Chicago Tribune had put it. The Park family's first official dinner together took place in the private dining room above their flagship restaurant, with a menu that told the complete story of their journey from crisis to triumph. Maya had insisted on handling all the logistics, which meant that security was handled by a team of former federal agents. The menu featured dishes that honored both traditional Korean family dinners and contemporary American celebrations, and the guest list was limited to the people who'd been part of their story from the beginning. Grandmother Han, Maya said, using the Korean honorific with the pride of someone who'd earned her place in a family that had welcomed her completely. Would you like to start with the blessing? Mrs. Han Park stood at the head of the table that seated 12 people who'd been transformed by Derek Chen's criminal conspiracy into something approaching an extended family. Raven and Junho, Maya, Detective Kim and her husband, Sophia Martinez and her new boyfriend Marcus, the police officer who'd helped with witness protection, Agent Thompson and his wife, and 2 of Raven's line cooks who'd become as close as sisters during the intense months of restaurant development. Tonight, Mrs. Ann Han began in her precise English. We gather not just as family, but as people who learned that Korean American families transform crisis into strength, corruption into integrity, and betrayal into deeper love. She lifted her glass of Korean rice wine that had been paired with American bourbon for a toast that bridged both cultures. Derek Chen intended to destroy us. Instead, he taught us that we're stronger together than we ever were apart. To Derek, Maya added with the wicked smile that had made her dangerous to criminal conspiracies. The best, worst thing that ever happened to our family. The table erupted in laughter and agreement. Derek's name had become a family joke, a shorthand for the particular kind of stupidity that mistakes Korean American resilience for vulnerability. And to Mom, Maya continued, her voice becoming more serious, who taught me that warning strangers about danger is what good people do, even when it's dangerous. Raven felt tears starting. Maya, and to Dad, Maya said, looking at Junho with the affection of someone who'd chosen him as family, who taught me that Korean business empires are built on protecting the people you love, not exploiting them. The meal began with banchan, traditional Korean side dishes that Mrs. Han had prepared according to recipes passed down through 4 generations, served alongside American-style appetizers that represented Raven's culinary evolution. Kimchi made from cabbages grown in the restaurant's rooftop garden, pickled vegetables that had fermented in traditional clay pots, Korean pears wrapped in prosciutto with honey that bridged both flavor profiles perfectly. Detective Kim, Junho said as they moved to the main course, Korean barbecue prepared with American Wagyu beef that represented the integration of both cultures at the highest level. Maya tells me you're considering a book deal about the investigation. Publishers are interested in the story of how a Korean American family helped expose the largest federal corruption case in Illinois history, Detective Kim replied. Though Maya keeps insisting that any book should focus on how to prevent other families from being targeted by similar crimes. Prevention is better than prosecution, Maya said firmly, serving herself Korean short ribs that had been braised in American bourbon and served with kimchi fried rice that had become the signature dish of their federal food service program. Derek won't be the last criminal who tries to exploit Korean American businesses, but he should be the last one who succeeds. Sophia raised her wine glass. To the Phoenix Bowl, she said. referencing the dish that had become symbolic of their family's transformation, and to the fact that Maya's college applications are going to break the admissions system at every university in the country. Speaking of which, Agent Thompson's wife said, "Maya, have you decided between MIT, Stanford, and the FBI cybersecurity program?" "I've decided to do all three," Maya replied matter-of-factly, as if planning to revolutionize federal cybersecurity while earning degrees from two of the country's most prestigious universities was a perfectly reasonable 17-year-old ambition. MIT for artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, Stanford for public policy and business, FBI for practical application of Korean American excellence in federal service. All three simultaneously? "Life is short," Maya said with the confidence of someone who'd survived kidnapping and federal investigations before her 18th birthday. "Besides, after everything Derek taught me about criminal exploitation of institutional vulnerabilities, I want to spend my career making sure those vulnerabilities get fixed." The conversation continued through courses that represented their complete journey. Korean traditional dishes that honored Mrs. Han's heritage, American fusion creations that showcased Raven's professional evolution, and innovative combinations that represented Maya's generation of Korean Americans who would shape the future of both cultures. "There's one more announcement," Raven said as they moved to dessert. Black sesame ice cream with Korean pear compote, served alongside traditional American wedding cake that Maya had insisted on including as practice for the actual wedding. The table quieted with anticipation. The Derek Chen Memorial Initiative for Korean American Excellence has been selected as the model for federal minority business development nationwide, Raven continued. "We're going to be working with the Small Business Administration to replicate our program in 37 states over the next 3 years." "Which means?" Sophia asked. "Which means," Junho said, "that Derek's criminal conspiracy is going to result in the largest expansion of Korean-American federal business partnerships in American history. Restaurants, construction companies, technology firms, agricultural cooperatives, all of them supported by programs designed to prevent the kind of exploitation Derek represented." Maya was grinning. "So Derek doesn't just go to prison for 30 years. His crimes become the foundation for Korean-American business success for the next 30 years. That," Mrs. Han said with satisfaction, "is what we call comprehensive revenge." As the evening concluded with traditional Korean tea service and American coffee that bridged both customs, Raven looked around the table at people who'd been strangers 8 months earlier and were now family by choice and experience. Detective Kim and her husband, who'd risked their careers to protect people they barely knew. Sophia and Marcus, who'd sacrificed their safety to gather evidence against criminals. Agent Thompson and his wife, who'd invested federal resources in supporting a Korean-American family's success. Her line cooks, who'd worked 18-hour days to prove that Korean cuisine deserved recognition at the highest levels of American fine dining. "Maya," she said as the evening wound down, "what do you think Derek would say if he could see us now?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I think Derek would finally understand the difference between exploiting families and building them," she said. "But mostly I think Derek would realize that Korean American families don't just survive people who try to destroy us. What do? We transform them into cautionary tales," Maya said with the wisdom of someone who'd learned to turn trauma into strength, crisis into opportunity, and criminal conspiracy into the foundation for unprecedented success. "And then we make sure their failures become stepping stones for everyone who comes after us." As they prepared to leave the private dining room, where they'd celebrated not just their engagement, but their evolution from victims to victors, Raven realized that Derek's greatest mistake hadn't been underestimating Korean-American business capabilities. His greatest mistake had been underestimating Korean-American family love. Love that transformed crisis into strength, corruption into integrity, and criminal conspiracy into the foundation for building something beautiful together. The first dinner together was also the last time they'd need to talk about Derek Chen as anything other than the criminal whose stupidity had brought them everything they'd ever dreamed of having. From now on, every meal would be about building the future, not surviving the past. And the future, like the Phoenix Bowl that had become their signature dish, was going to be more beautiful than anyone had dared imagine possible. Satinai. If you're captivated by this story of love, triumphing over betrayal, and Korean-American excellence emerging from criminal conspiracy, subscribe to hear more tales of families who transform their greatest challenges into their most powerful strengths. The plate crashed to the floor with a bang that echoed through the empty diner, but this time it was Maya accidentally knocking over her water glass as she laughed at something Junho had said about wedding planning. The sound that had once signaled the beginning of their nightmare had become the soundtrack of their joy. Derek Chen had taught them that Korean-American families could be targeted, exploited, and betrayed. But Raven Ellis Park, Maya Ellis Park, Junho Park, and Mrs. Han Park had taught the world that Korean-American families could also transform every attempt to destroy them into opportunities to build something stronger, more beautiful, and more enduring than their enemies had ever imagined possible. The broken plate had become the foundation for an empire built on love, integrity, and the particular kind of courage that chooses to warn strangers about danger even when it's dangerous. And in federal kitchens across America, the Phoenix Bowl would be served daily to remind everyone that Korean-American excellence rises from every attempt to destroy it, more magnificent than ever before.